Chapter 7:12. The lords of various countries were in a good mood. They were all watching the show. But the Wuxia cultivators were watching the fierce fight above them in horror. They didn't dare to leave or run away. They were all standing there restlessly. With tears in her eyes, Xiaofan Fairy stared at the fierce fight in the sky. Her red lips moved and she murmured with a bitter smile, "Nongzhu. He is Mr. Nongzhu, the famous owner of the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. Mr. Nongzhu is Xiaoyao, and Xiaoyao is Mr. Nongzhu. Why did you lie to me? You lied to me so miserably." Yan Ji's words, "Nongzhu, today is the day you die," immediately made Xiaofan Fairy, who had been paying attention to Nongzhu, understand everything. Hua Rui, who was beside her, stared at the sky in a daze, her eyes shining with a strange light. She had never expected that her brother-in-law, who had suddenly disappeared, was such a powerful figure. He was also a famous figure in the cultivation world. His cultivation was too strong. It was said that he was a close friend of the most powerful cultivator in the world. My God! What on earth did my sister miss? Bang! A heavy sound came from high up in the sky. A figure smashed into the sea like a meteor, creating a huge splash. Before the waves had completely returned, the falling figure shot out from the ocean once again. With an angry roar, it said, "Kill him together." It was Yan Ji's voice. It seemed like he had suffered a loss again. As soon as he finished speaking, two beams of sword light appeared in the sky. They shone with each other and strangled Nongzhu's hundreds of phantoms crazily. Yan Ji, who had rushed up to the sky, waved the long whip in his hand completely. In an instant, the dark and gloomy whip shadows shot out disorderly like arrows. After cooperating with Hua Zongming and Pu Taidong, who were moving freely in the sky, they immediately suppressed the over 100 shadows of Nongzhu to less than 50. It made people feel that Nongzhu was in a precarious situation. Xiaofan Fairy was still immersed in the memories of the past with tears in her eyes, but Hua Rui was a little worried by the movement above. "Senior Nan Ming, go and help Senior Nongzhu. I'm fine here," Yu Qianqiu said in a low voice. Although he couldn't see clearly what was happening above, he could feel that Nongzhu's qi power was suppressed by Yan Ji and the other two. Old ancestor Nan Ming turned around to look at him, and he was instantly slightly shocked. He discovered that there were two balls of pitch-black flames leaping about in Yu Qianqiu's eyes as if they were about to jump out of his eye sockets uncontrollably. Moreover, he could faintly feel a bone-chilling coldness from Yu Qianqiu's body. That faintly discernible and terrifying aura made one's hair stand on end. Nongzhu will be fine for the time being. The old man still has some powerful skills that he hasn't used yet. Just as Patriarch Nan Ming finished speaking, the situation in the sky suddenly changed. Dozens of phantoms of Nongzhu, who had been suppressed by the three of them, suddenly emerged from the gaps of their encirclement. Dozens of phantoms danced in the air like flying fairies. The speed was getting faster and faster. The people watching from below only felt that their eyes were blurred. In an instant, each of Nongzhu's phantoms suddenly appeared as a clone. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of vivid and lifelike Nongzhu appeared in the air and surrounded the three of them again. Yan Ji and the other two were so fast that their figures could not be seen clearly. They attacked each of Nongzhu's phantoms crazily, but it seemed that every attack missed. They couldn't find out which one was the real Nongzhu. All of Nongzhu's phantoms suddenly stopped moving in the air. Some were standing, some were lying, some were leaning, some were tilting, and some were sitting with their legs crossed. Each of them was vivid and lifelike. They were handsome and elegant, fully displaying the peerless elegance of the most handsome man in the world. Every attack of Yan Ji and the other two easily pierced, slashed through each of the phantoms. They had no effect on the hundreds of phantoms that stopped in the air. Because they were all phantoms, physical attacks had no effect on them. Just when the three of them had attacked every phantom without any effect, the hundreds of phantoms stared at the three of them with smiles on their faces. Suddenly, they gently placed the flute to their lips in unison. Their 10 fingers moved up and down the flute holes in a carefree and unrestrained manner. A melodious flute sound reverberated endlessly between the heaven and the earth. Suddenly, the world became clear. It seemed that the people could no longer hear the whistling wind or the sound of the raging waves hitting the shore. They were in the sea area, but at this moment, they suddenly found themselves in a brilliant sea of flowers. The spring sun was beautiful, and the flowers were gorgeous. Many butterflies were flying in the sea of flowers, and many children were running happily in the sea of flowers. They seemed to have returned to their childhood, playing hide-and-seek and catching butterflies in the flowers. And they were one of the happy children. Just when they were gradually immersed in the happy times of their childhood, Pei Fong suddenly shouted angrily, "What a powerful sound illusion!" The phantoms in front of them suddenly shattered like porcelain vases that had fallen to the ground. All the beautiful scenes were shattered into pieces by Pei Fong's angry shout. In front of them was still Xian Island, and still this sea area. They were all illusions. Everyone was shocked. Only now did they remember that the fight was still going on. But why was there no sound of fighting? They hurriedly looked again, and just happened to see a body with its head smashed into pieces, falling powerlessly into the sea. In the air, Nongzhu and Hua Zongming stood face to face. However, Hua Zongming's head drooped down powerlessly. From his back, several bloody holes could be seen. A bamboo flute had pierced through his chest and drilled out from his heart. The hole at the end of the flute was bleeding profusely. Yan Ji's eyes were wide open, and he looked at Nongzhu in disbelief. He was swaying in the air, and the whip in his hand had long disappeared. One of his hands was covering his throat, and blood was flowing through the gaps between his fingers. His other hand, which was covering the left side of his chest, was also a patch of bright red. "Yan Ji, I told you that you couldn't kill me, but you just didn't believe me. I didn't want to kill anyone, but you forced me to kill you. Why do you have to do this?" Nongzhu looked at Yan Ji expressionlessly and said. Suddenly, a heavy palm landed on Hua Zongming's chest. The flute flew out from Hua Zongming's back and shot out in an arc. With a bang, it directly blew Yan Ji's head into pieces. The 2 corpses fell to the sea at the same time, splashing 2 waves. Nongzhu's flute drilled into the sea with a whoosh. It stirred in the sea for a while, and then bounced out with a bang, landing in Nongzhu's hand in the air. Nongzhu held it in her hand and looked at it, as if she was checking if it was clean. Then she nodded with satisfaction and teleported back to Nanming ancestor and Yu Qianzhou's side. Everyone looked at Nongzhu in shock. Whether it was the lords of the various countries or the Wuxia cultivators, they didn't expect that Nongzhu could kill 3 lords of the mid-divine transformation realm in the blink of an eye. 1 against 3. They were all at the mid-divine transformation realm, but he killed them all, and he was completely unharmed. What did this mean? The lords of the various countries looked at each other. Yan Ji, Hua Zongming, and Pu Taidong died just like that? This was a little hard for them to accept. They thought that Nongzhu would have a hard time in the future without Bai Changchun's support. Now it seemed that even without Bai Changchun's support, as long as he didn't offend the late divine transformation realm cultivators, he could still live freely without Bai Changchun's support. The skills he showed just now were enough to prove it. At least from the current situation, most of the lords might not be a match for Nongzhu. Jade Flower Fairy bit her lip. She didn't change at all because of Nongzhu's powerful skills. She still looked resentful with tears in her eyes. However, Hua Rui was different. Not only was she excited, but she couldn't hide the excitement in her eyes. She really wanted to run to Nongzhu, pull his arm, and call him brother-in-law happily, just like in the past. Hua Rui's imagination ran wild. If brother-in-law could reconcile with sister, with brother-in-law's ability, who would dare to touch the Moon Clan in the future? Nongzhu looked around coldly. The murderous aura around him was still there. He actually wasn't a bloodthirsty person. He just wanted to live a carefree life without competing with the world. He didn't want to offend anyone on purpose, nor did he want to have conflicts with anyone. He didn't want to kill anyone either. That was because he thought that he was born with no ambition. There was no need for him to waste his energy fighting with others. However, he wasn't a soft-hearted person either. When it was time to kill, he never hesitated. Today, even though he killed to protect Yu Qianzhou, it was also to avoid trouble for himself in the future. He deliberately killed in front of everyone to intimidate them. As soon as Bai Chongqun left, these people showed their arrogance and were ready to make trouble. They actually targeted Bai Chongqun's disciple. If he didn't intimidate them now, when would he? Once they attacked together, he wouldn't be able to block them even if he wanted to with his current level of cultivation. Ancestor Nanming glanced at Nongzhu. He didn't seem surprised that Nongzhu could kill Yan Ji and the other two. On the other hand, Yu Qianzhou was a little surprised. However, he wasn't surprised because Bai Chongqun once told him not to underestimate Nongzhu. She wasn't as easy to bully as she looked. However, Yu Qianzhou kept looking at the flute in Nongzhu's hand. He felt a little nauseous. This was definitely not the first time this flute had killed someone. He thought of Nongzhu playing the flute next to his lips and then the scene of his opponent's intestines being pierced or brains being smashed. How could he stuff such a disgusting thing into his mouth? He really had to give it to him. That scene was like a bloodthirsty swordsman licking his lips after killing the enemy and tasting the blood on his sword. The atmosphere was a little quiet. Pei Fong stared at Nongzhu coldly. He looked left and right and transmitted his voice to Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangde. You've all seen it. Nongzhu is very likely to break through to the soul transformation final stage soon. Keeping him here won't do us any good. Why don't we take the opportunity now? What do you think? The two nodded slightly, obviously agreeing with Pei Fong's words. Pei Fong immediately chuckled and looked up at Nongzhu. Nongzhu, I really couldn't tell. What a good trick. Even I, Pei Fong, have to admire you. However, almost all the forces here had disciples who died in the hands of Yu Qianzhou. It's time to end it today. Nongzhu, I advise you to hand over Yu Qianzhou obediently. Don't put up any unnecessary resistance. Otherwise, hee. Don't blame us for being impolite. Chapter 713. The lords of the spirit-severing realm quickly exchanged glances. None of them were fools. The meaning behind Pei Fong's words was self-evident. Ancestor Nanming quickly glanced at Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan, and Ouyangde. Yu Qianzhou gnashed his teeth in hatred. Sure enough, none of them were good. They were all capricious villains. Damn fatty, don't fall into my hands. Otherwise, I'll make you feel good. Nongzhu also narrowed her eyes and sneered, Fatty Pei, when Bai Chongqun was here, you still called Yu Qianzhou brother you. Why do you want to kill him in the blink of an eye? I haven't seen your brother do anything wrong to you. Could it be that you're deliberately looking for trouble and want to get rid of me as well? Pei Fong didn't mind being seen through by Nongzhu. Instead, he laughed and said, Nongzhu, if you insist on saying that, then what else can I say? He floated in the air and said with a laugh, then let me have a taste of brother Nongzhu's shifting position transposition skill. No problem, but before that, I have something to confirm with you. Nongzhu said. Pei Fong waved his hand and pretended to be generous, say it. As long as it's something that can be said, I'll tell you. What he said was the same as not saying it. Nongzhu snorted, I've asked you about this matter in the cornucopia before. That day, when Yu Qianzhou confronted the underworld messenger at the cornucopia, the underworld messenger suddenly found out about Yu Qianzhou's identity when he was leaving. Was it you who leaked it? Pei Fong's smile froze. He didn't expect that she would suddenly ask about this matter. He immediately became angry and shouted, Nongzhu, don't talk nonsense here. I've already said that it's none of my business. He was the one who did it, but he definitely wouldn't admit it. The reputation of betraying the enemy and colluding with the enemy was much worse than some bad reputation. Nongzhu sneered. She looked at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Do you know what to do now?" Yu Qianzhou stared at Pei Fong coldly. He knew that Nongzhu would not say something like that without reason. It seemed that Pei Fong had done something behind her back then. It was no wonder that the green-browed guy had suddenly turned against him. Yu Qianzhou stared at Pei Fong coldly. But the strange thing was, why did Nongzhu tell him this now? However, Nongzhu's next words immediately made him understand. Nongzhu said, "Help me take care of Ze." Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou was shocked. Nongzhu obviously knew that he was no match for Pei Fong, and she was entrusting him with her funeral. At this time, Nongzhu told him that she had been plotted against by Pei Fong. She just wanted to tell him that she would avenge him if there was a chance. Nongzhu was ready to die. Ancestor Nanming suddenly looked at Nongzhu. He and Nongzhu were old friends, but he didn't understand why Nongzhu thought that Yu Qianzhou could escape and have a chance to avenge him. In addition to Pei Fong, Qi Zhoujuan and Ouyangda were also eyeing him covetously. Of course, he didn't know that Bai Chongqun had once told Nongzhu that Yu Qianzhou was more resistant to death than the two of them. It seemed that he had a treasure to protect him, which made it difficult for others to kill him. Therefore, he pinned his hope on Yu Qianzhou. "Don't talk nonsense. I'll take care of your disciple for you." Pei Fong suddenly burst out a terrible momentum, and the airflow around him spread out like visible waves. Hua Rui suddenly grabbed Jasper Flower Fairy's arm, looking very nervous. If it was before, they might not know who Pei Fong was. But since the cultivation world of Wuxia extended its tentacles, they naturally heard of this master at the last stage of Wuxia. He was one of the legendary top 10 masters. Could Nongzhu deal with him? Damn it! Damn fatty, just you wait and see. Yu Qianzhou cursed in his heart and prepared to escape with Nongzhu. He couldn't let Nongzhu die in Pei Fong's hands. As for the Nanming Patriarch, as one of the 4 great men, Pei Fong didn't dare to hurt him easily. He just had to take Nongzhu away. After all, he didn't know much about the Nanming Patriarch. The fewer people who knew about the secret of Utopia, the better. However, at this critical moment, a figure suddenly teleported over and stood in front of Nongzhu. He sneered at Pei Fong and said, "Pei Fong, you're going too far. Bai Chongqun just left, and you're doing this. It's really disappointing. I'll be the first one who can't stand it anymore." It was Hu Changshou, who had been standing at the side without saying a word. Nongzhu, Yu Qianzhou, and the Nanming Patriarch looked at each other. They didn't expect Hu Changshou to come out to help. It was too surprising. Especially Yu Qianzhou. He had a feud with the Yun Palace, and Hu Changshou had wanted to kill him for a long time. Why did he come out to help now? This was simply too inconceivable. Not to mention them, even the feudal lords were at a loss. When did Hu Changshou become a Samaritan? Didn't he know that Pei Fong, Ouyangda, and Qi Zhoujuan were on the same side? Did he have the ability to fight the 3 of them alone? Hu Changshou. Pei Fong was stunned at first, then he sneered and said, "When did you wear the same side as Nongzhu? You came here to act like a hero. I hope you don't run later." Hee hee. "We didn't look for you, but you came to die. Great. Today is a good day to settle the score between us." As soon as he finished speaking, Qi Zhoujuan and Ouyangda had already flashed over. They stared at Hu Changshou with killing intent. Seeing that a battle was inevitable, everyone slowly retreated. A battle between soul formation final stage experts was no joke. Hu Changshou said calmly, "Settle the score." "I don't know who will settle the score. Even if I don't stop you, you probably don't have the guts to touch them. If you're not afraid of that person from the demon domain, go ahead and attack." Huh. Pei Fong's fat face shook as he cackled, "Hu Changshou, I think you're out of your mind. Bai Changchun has already gone to the East Holy Land, and you're still using him to scare us. Now, the demon domain. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly felt as if someone was strangling his neck. He couldn't laugh anymore, and the fat on his face stiffened. Qi Jiujuan and O Yangda's expressions also changed abruptly, as if they remembered something. Laugh. Why aren't you laughing anymore? Fatty Pei, continue laughing. Hu Changshou sneered and said, I think you're too excited. It's true that Bai Changchun left, but don't forget that the demon domain torturers are passed down from generation to generation. If one Bai Changchun leaves, there's always another Bai Changchun. Every torturer of the demon domain torturer was a figure whose name shook the world. For countless years, no one had ever been able to resist the demon domain. Fatty Pei, if you have the guts, then do something. I don't believe that the current torturer can watch the previous torturer's disciple get bullied. I'd like to see if you can survive a month after you touch Yu Qianqiu. Sigh. Really, why do I have to remind you that some people are restless and like to look for excitement? The feudal lords fell silent. They realized that everyone was too excited. How could they forget this? Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu looked at each other speechlessly. The two of them didn't even think of using the demon domain torturers to scare them, because they knew that the current torturers couldn't do anything to them. Who knew that Hu Changshou would come out and make a big show of himself? They didn't expect it to work. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up slightly, and he had a plan in his heart. The expressions on Pei Fong and the other two's faces were complicated. They'd said what they wanted to say, and they'd also taken a stance. Now, they were in a difficult position. However, Pei Fong's skin wasn't just ordinarily thick. He immediately laughed and said, Brother Hu, look at what you're saying. Brother Yu and I hit it off when we were in the cornucopia. Why would I harm him? I'm just afraid that he'll be sad to see Master leave, so I purposely joked with him. Then, he waved his hand at Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu and said, Brother Nongzhu, Brother Yu, don't take it to heart. I was just joking with you. Even Ouyangda and Qi Jiujuan squeezed out a few smiles. It's not without reason that he's fat. He's thick-skinned. Hu Changshou said sarcastically. However, Pei Fong was really thick-skinned, so he didn't care about his sarcasm. He said with a smile, From what Brother Hu said, do you know who the current torturer of the demon domain is? Hu Changshou snorted coldly and didn't answer. In fact, he didn't know who the current torturer of the demon domain was. The reason why he stood out to help Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu now was because he had his own plans. Now that Yin Baikong was dead, and Bing Chengzi believed that Yan Zhuixing was haunted and had a tendency to be independent, he was no different from a loner now. The next target of Pei Fong and the others would definitely be him, so he had to find a way to protect himself. Just when he didn't know what to do, Pei Fong and the other two gave him a chance to get closer to Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu by forsaking their former enmity. He could also see that Nongzhu's cultivation was probably not far from breaking through to the late stage of deity transformation. If he could take this opportunity to form an alliance with Nongzhu, he might be able to pull Wen Lanfeng in. Maybe he could also build a relationship with the demon domain, and then he wouldn't have to be afraid of Fatty Pei and the others. As for whether it would work or not, it was another matter. Even if it didn't work, he had to give it a try. At least, people like Nongzhu valued friendship and would return it when they owed a favor. Brother Hu is really tight-lipped. Pei Fong smiled to cover up his embarrassment and turned to ask Yu Qianqiu, Brother Yu, may I know who the current torturer of the demon domain is? Don't get me wrong, we just want to know who it is so that we can congratulate him for taking over the demon domain, so that we can call him by his name when we meet. That's all. Damn it. You turn hostile faster than turning a page. Once I say that I'm the new torturer, you'll turn hostile again. Yu Qianqiu sneered, I'd better not say his name, so as not to scare you. You'll naturally know who he is when there's a chance. Pei Fong's expression froze, and he, Ouyangda and Qi Jiujuan looked at each other. The three of them racked their brains, but they couldn't think of anyone's name that could scare him except by Changchun. Could it be Wen Lanfeng? It seemed that there was no one in the cultivation world who could make them worry, except for Wen Lanfeng. Could there be a master that they didn't know? Chapter 7:14. After a moment of hesitation, Qi Jiujuan sent a voice transmission to his two companions. I don't know if he's telling the truth. Whether he's telling the truth or not, we can't afford to take that risk. It's easy to find out if he's telling the truth. Let's go to the demon ghost realm and have a look. If it's true, we'll talk about it later. If it's false, we don't have to rush to deal with them. I don't think they can run away now, Pei Fong said. After a while of discussion, the three of them reached an agreement. Patting his belly, Pei Fong laughed at the crowd and said, "The new punishment enforcer of the demon ghost domain has been replaced. After sending Bai Changchun away, we should go congratulate the new punishment enforcer for taking over the demon ghost domain. I wonder if everyone would like to go with us." The lords exchanged glances. They had been living together in the cultivation world for so many years, and they all knew what kind of person Pei Fong was. They all knew what he wanted to do. He just wanted to see if the current torture master of the demon ghost realm was easy to bully. If he was easy to bully, Pei Fong and the other two would not go to congratulate him but to send him off. The reason why he wanted to gather everyone was probably because he had the mentality that the law couldn't punish too many people. No matter how powerful the torture master of the demon ghost realm was, it was unlikely that he could kill all the soul formation cultivators in the world. But then again, everyone wanted Pei Fong and the other two to have the ability to send the current torture master off. Without the suppression of the demon ghost realm, everyone's life would be better. Otherwise, no one would feel comfortable with a pair of terrifying eyes staring at them from behind. Even if a fight really broke out, there was someone who stood up for them, and they didn't need to do anything. They could even watch the show. Why not? Someone immediately shouted, "Yes, it's common sense to say goodbye to the old and welcome the new. We should go to the demon ghost realm to congratulate him." With one person taking the lead, everyone followed. Good, good, good. Pei Fong looked at the crowd with a smile and then cupped his hands to Nongzhu and the others, saying, "Guys, it's just a misunderstanding. Please don't take it to heart. We've sent Bai Changchun away. We'll go to the demon ghost realm to congratulate the new torture master. Goodbye." He did not expect Nongzhu and the others to be kind to him. As soon as he finished his words, he flew away with Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangda. The lords also bid farewell to Nongzhu and the others. In the blink of an eye, all the lords of the soul formation stage had left, leaving only 3 dead bodies on the sea. The people of the Chinese cultivation world heaved a sigh of relief. They had thought that they were going to face a disaster today. They didn't expect that they would be lucky enough to get through it. After this lesson, they realized that everyone's thinking was simply too naive. Spirit-severing experts simply wouldn't put them in their eyes. Not to mention Bai Changchun, no matter how much Feng Xiangtian shouted, Bai Changchun wouldn't even look him in the eye, let alone talk to him. Everyone was still in shock and didn't dare to stay any longer. Besides, the 2 soul formation stage experts in front of them also didn't take them seriously. If they stayed any longer, who knew what other accidents would happen? Thus, one by one, they carefully excused themselves and quickly left with their tails between their legs. They had come with hope, but in the end, they discovered that everything was just a bubble, and they had to go back and find another way out. Reality was always cruel and could easily destroy all beautiful dreams. Of course, there were people who didn't leave. The flying ritual implement of the Moon Clan didn't move at all. Jade Flower Fairy and the others faced the sea breeze, the corners of their white dresses fluttering in the wind as they looked over quietly. However, Nongzhu deliberately ignored them. She held the flute with her hands behind her back expressionlessly and looked into the distance. However, the fingertips of her slender fingers that were holding the flute were deeply embedded in the flesh of her palm. Who asked that relationship to leave such a deep scar in the hearts of a man and a woman? They wanted to forget it, but when they thought about it, they realized that it was all hatred. They didn't know that it was because they loved each other so deeply that they were hurt so deeply and hated each other so much. The people of the Sword Clan didn't leave either. The leader of the Sword Clan looked at Nanming Ancestor and Nongzhu uneasily. He wanted to go up and talk to them, but he realized that they didn't even look at him. Thus, he cupped his hands at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Yu Qianzhou, my clan is very grateful for your help this time. I really don't know how to repay you." In fact, Yu Qianzhou didn't only save his clan. If it weren't for Yu Qianzhou's interference, the other soul formation lords wouldn't have let these Wuxia cultivators go at all, not to mention Yan Ji. Yu Qianzhou glanced at him coldly, then looked at Tu Yanfeng and said with a faint smile, "Elder Tu, I've fulfilled my promise back then. From now on, we don't owe each other anything." Tu Yanfeng cupped his hands and thanked him, sweating profusely. The leader of the Sword Clan's expression changed slightly. He squeezed out a smile and wanted to continue their relationship. Unexpectedly, Nongzhu glared at him coldly and said indifferently, "If you don't scram, you'll die." Immediately, the leader was so scared that he shivered. He threw out his flying magic tool and quickly escaped with a few people. Looking at the group of black dots disappearing in the distant sky, Nanming Ancestor sighed and said, "It's a pity that Bai Changchun left. If he was still here, they wouldn't have dared to do this. A group of fickle villains. None of them are good people. It's useless to be angry." Nongzhu turned to look at Yu Qianzhou and asked worriedly, "They've all gone to the demon realm. What are you going to do?" Yu Qianzhou turned a deaf ear to her and stared at the surface of the sea with bright eyes. Suddenly, he flew over quickly and landed on the surface of the sea. He drove the waves and searched for a few storage pouches from the corpses of Hua Zongming and the other two. After checking them one by one, he instantly beamed with joy. Ignoring the shocked gazes of the crowd, he directly stuffed the pouches into his arms and flew back. "What did you say just now?" Yu Qianzhou asked, patting the things under his chest. Nongzhu's face suddenly became long and she roared, "Pei Fong and the others have gone to the demon realm. What are you going to do?" Not to mention the matter of Jasper Flower Fairy, he was upset at the thought that Shuntian Island would be trampled by those people. However, as the current punishment envoy, Yu Qianzhou was still greedy for petty gains. How could he not be angry? Yu Qianzhou looked back at the sky and sneered, "Let them go. There are people on Shuntian Island who can deal with them." He had already thought about it. If he couldn't handle it himself, he would immediately bring Bai Changchun back. He was not afraid of who. Nongzhu was stunned and asked in surprise, "Who?" Nanming Ancestor also couldn't help asking, "Is it Wen Lanfeng?" Yu Qianzhou's mouth curled up into a smirk and said, "Much more powerful than Wen Lanfeng." It turned out that he was already prepared. No wonder he was not in a hurry. Nongzhu and Nanming Ancestor looked at each other and asked at the same time, "Who is it?" "You will know when the time comes." He. I want to give them a surprise." Yu Qianzhou didn't want to be entangled in this topic. He tilted his head and winked at Nanming Ancestor, saying, "Senior Nanming, is this how you treat your guests?" Nanming Ancestor was stunned and looked in the direction he was hinting at. He raised his hand and patted his forehead, saying, My bad. I should have left our distinguished guest aside." He raised his hand and invited, "Jasper Flower Fairy, please come to the island and have a chat." Nongzhu's expression twitched and she stared at Nanming Ancestor with a twisted face. She was really worried that this old guy had some designs on Jasper Flower Fairy, as Yu Qianzhou had said. Although she didn't want to have anything to do with Jasper Flower Fairy now, she didn't want Nanming Ancestor to have any designs on her. Jasper Flower Fairy bowed to Nanming Ancestor and then put away the flying celestial device under her feet. They landed on the island. However, from the moment they landed, Jasper Flower Fairy's eyes were fixed on Nongzhu's face, while Nongzhu turned her head indifferently. When Patriarch Nan Ming saw this scene, he snickered. Yu Qianqiu slowly moved backward. Jasper Flower Fairy, with her beautiful hair in a bun, suddenly said, "Should I call you Mr. Nongzhu or Xiaoyao?" Nongzhu didn't look back. She snorted and said, "It doesn't matter what you call me. There is no need to call me anything." Jasper Flower Fairy gritted her teeth and said word by word, "You have been lying to me from the beginning." Nongzhu suddenly turned back and sneered, "This should be applied to you. At the very least, from the moment we met, I told you my real name, and your name is fake. You didn't even give me a chance to find you again." Jasper Flower Fairy gnashed her teeth. Nongzhu sneered and said, "What's the point of talking about this now? Then give me back my purple dress." Jasper Flower Fairy suddenly shouted. Her voice was so sharp that it shocked Nanming Ancestor and Yu Qianqiu. She was a great beauty after all, but now she didn't care about her image at all. She seemed to be crazy. Hua Rui, who was at the side, knew the relationship between the two. But the other elder of the Moon clan was dumbfounded. Although he heard something, he couldn't believe that the leader dared to shout at a soul formation cultivator. Nongzhu said coldly, "Purple dress? Who is Purple Dress? I don't know her. Go find someone you know. Don't come to me. You." Jasper Flower Fairy almost went crazy. She wanted to rush up and fight with Nongzhu. Luckily, Hua Rui held her back. Jasper Flower Fairy suddenly turned back and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu." She wanted to ask Yu Qianqiu to come out and testify, but Yu Qianqiu didn't see her. Instead, he saw a figure jump into the sea, probably never to show up again. Who else could it be except Yu Qianqiu? When Jasper Flower Fairy mentioned purple dress, he felt something was wrong. He didn't want to get involved in the couple's fight. It was better to run away. Besides, he had something to do and it was not convenient for him to stay here. Jasper Flower Fairy was stunned. Then she turned back and loosened her teeth. She begged, "Mr. Nongzhu, please give me back my purple dress, please." "Humph." Nongzhu snorted and said, "Purple dress will never go with you. Anyway, I won't let Purple Dress follow the Moon Clan disciples' fate of abandoning their husband and children. Let your women follow the rules of the Moon Clan. Don't drag Purple Dress into it. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." He didn't like the Moon Clan disciples who brought their daughters to the clan and abandoned their sons and husbands when they had sons. Chapter 7:15. Don't worry, I won't let Ze join the Moon Clan, nor will I make her follow the rules of the Moon Clan. Give her back to me, I beg you, Goddess Qianghua begged. Nongzhu said indifferently, Ze doesn't even know who you are. She won't go with you. She also won't like staying with a bunch of women who abandoned their husbands and children. Don't even think about it. These words were like steel needles, stabbing into Qianghua Fairy's heart. She felt like she was struck by lightning and stumbled back a few steps. She asked with a pale face, "You really won't give Ze back to me?" Nongzhu turned around and faced the raging sea. She said indifferently, "Don't ask anymore. Even if you ask me 10,000 times, I won't let Ze go with you." Shameless. Qianghua Fairy said in a trembling voice, "If you don't let her go with me, I'll go find her myself. I'll go to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest to find her myself. Why don't you try?" Nongzhu suddenly turned around and said word by word, "If you dare to go find Ze, I will flatten the Moon Clan and kill your entire family. This is not a difficult thing for me. I mean what I say. Whether you go find Ze or protect your entire Moon Clan, it's up to you." Hua Rui and the other elders' faces turned pale. Hua Rui had thought that her sister and brother-in-law could reconcile and then her brother-in-law could protect the Moon Clan. That would be the best. However, her brother-in-law actually said that he would flatten the Moon clan. He was very decisive. She said in a trembling voice, "Brother-in-law, you..." Before she could finish, Nongzhu stared at her angrily and shouted, "Shut up. Your brother-in-law is not here. Your Moon clan is full of heartless women. Is there a brother-in-law? What a joke." Hua Rui was speechless. Qianghua Fairy sobbed and said, "Xiaoyao, you are so cruel. You want to separate us. That's the best way to describe you in the past." Nongzhu glared at him and raised the flute on her back. She said indifferently, "If you keep talking, I'll kill two of you right now." Jade Flower Fairy was shocked. There were only two people beside her. Who else could she want to kill? She bit her lip so hard that it bled. She shook her head and looked at Nongzhu in disbelief. She couldn't believe that the gentle and refined man she had fallen in love with at first sight could actually be so cruel. Resolutely, she turned around and said, "Let's go." A white figure disappeared into the distance. Hua Rui looked at Nongzhu and sighed slightly. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. In the end, she followed another elder and flew into the sky to chase after Viburnum Fairy. The salty and humid sea breeze blew endlessly. The two people on the mountain peak stood there silently. Nanming Old Ancestor tugged at his red beard and looked at Nongzhu, who was deep in thought with her eyes closed, a little embarrassed. After a long time, he asked weakly, "Nongzhu, is she Ziyi's mother?" Nongzhu closed her eyes and nodded slightly. Nanming Old Ancestor smiled embarrassedly and said, "Nongzhu, I'm sorry. I didn't know you two had such a relationship. Don't blame me. It was Yu Qianzhou who instigated me to do it. Damn it, he ran away first. By the way, what's going on between you two? Tell me. It's a long story. Let's talk about it when we have time." Nongzhu opened her eyes and said calmly, "I'm worried about the demon domain now. I don't know what Yu Qianzhou is doing. No, I have to go and have a look." As soon as she finished speaking, she had already left quickly. Nanming Old Ancestor said, "Hey." He wanted to ask who the new torture envoy of the demon domain was, but Nongzhu didn't want to stay a moment longer. Thinking that he was in a bad mood at the moment, she decided to ask him later. Shantian Island was still windy and sunny. The grass and trees swayed in the wind. In the big house at the center of the island, Yu Qianzhou stood there obediently with his hands behind his back. Lady Mu was really like a virtuous wife as she carefully helped him put on the human skin mask. She didn't know why Yu Qianzhou wanted to wear this thing to change his appearance. Although she had doubts in her heart, after the previous lesson, she knew that she should just do as he said and not ask what she shouldn't ask. If it was something she could know, Mr. would naturally tell her. Compared to the previous one, Mr. was easier to get along with. Unlike the previous one, he didn't even speak to her, let alone act so intimately. He made her tremble with fear all day long and the days were really hard to bear. Now, as long as she didn't break any taboos, life was still very easy. After putting on the human skin mask, Lady Mu walked around Yu Qianzhou and looked around. After confirming that there were no flaws, she smiled and said, "Mister, it's done. It's like you've changed into a different person." As she said this, she took out a clear bronze mirror and showed it to Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou nodded with satisfaction. Lady Mu put away the bronze mirror and helped Yu Qianzhou take off his outer clothes. Then, she helped him put on a set of gray clothes that Yu Qianzhou had prepared in advance. After changing his clothes, Yu Qianzhou sat cross-legged on the ground. Lady Mu loosened his hair band and carefully combed his hair. After straightening his hair, she pulled it all the way to his back and tied it with a silk ribbon around his waist, letting it hang naturally behind him. After everything was done, Yu Qianzhou's appearance had changed completely, and he was completely different from his previous self. He also looked more like a master than before, with a proud and inviolable look. It was just that he seemed to have aged a lot. Lady Mu's eyes were filled with doubt. There was actually someone who didn't like being young and instead pretended to be old. She didn't know what Mr. was trying to do. Yu Qianzhou saw her doubt and swept the clothes on the mat into his storage bag. He smiled and said, "Lady Mu, remember, from now on, I'm not called Yu Qianzhou. I'm called Niu Yud." Niu Yud? Lady Mu was stunned, then she bowed and said, "Lady Mu will remember. When Mr. appears with this appearance, you will be called Niu Yud." Smart. Yu Qianzhou gave her a thumbs up and said with a smile, "In the demon domain, you're the only one who knows this secret. Don't tell anyone else. Give me some fresh fruits." Hearing that she was the only one in the demon domain who knew this secret, a hint of surprise flashed across Lady Mu's face. Then, she quickly brought over a long, short table and placed it in front of Yu Qianzhou with colorful fruits. Yu Qianzhou rubbed his hands and waved them like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Then, he began to enjoy the fruits. Lady Mu consciously knelt behind him and massaged his shoulders with just the right amount of strength. After eating and drinking his fill, he didn't know when he fell asleep. His head was pillowed by a pair of elastic thighs. These days were quite comfortable. When the new morning arrived, the sunlight once again shone on the rolling dark clouds of the demon ghost region. A group of more than 100 people quickly flew above the clouds, forming a powerful aura that directly split the dark clouds below, forming a straight line that quickly extended behind the group of people. After they passed, the dark clouds rolled and closed again. There was nothing unusual, but the demons and ghosts below were frightened by the movement above. They had never seen so many powerful experts come to the demon domain together. After a while, the group of over 100 people finally flew past the endless dark clouds. A mirror-like lake appeared in front of them. It was so big that they couldn't see the edge. Everyone's expression became a little serious. They all knew that this was the famous 1,000-mile lake in the demon domain. The former #1 expert in the world lived on a small island in the middle of the lake. This used to be a forbidden area in the entire cultivation world. Few trespassers could survive. Now that everyone had come together, it was equivalent to breaking the rules here. They didn't know how the new master of Obedient Island would react. Everyone was a little nervous, mainly because they didn't know what kind of person the new torture master was. A black that had already appeared on the surface of the lake far ahead. The three people who were flying at the front exchanged glances and gradually slowed down the speed of the people behind them. They had to restrain themselves before they found out who the new torturer was. Actually, with Pei Fong and the other two's cultivation, they should have arrived long ago. However, in order to come with everyone and increase their sense of security, they had to sacrifice their speed. Obedient Island was like a cat's eye, embedded in the blue and calm surface of the lake. It was quiet and secluded from the rest of the world. However, it was precisely this small island that caused the hundreds of people floating dozens of meters away from the island to feel great psychological pressure. Everyone looked at each other, but no one dared to land on the island first. Finally, everyone's gaze fell on Pei Fong. Pei Fong's expression twitched, but he had no choice. He had to take the lead. Even so, that island still had Bai Changchun's influence, so he didn't dare to trespass. He coughed and said loudly with his fat face shaking, "I heard that a new torture master has been appointed in the demon domain. The lords of the various countries are here to congratulate him." The voice echoed in the sky. While everyone was concentrating on the big house in the center of the island, they heard someone murmuring inside, "Miss Mu, didn't Bai Changchun say that there are rules in the demon ghost territory? Anyone who trespasses can be killed without mercy. Can I go out and kill a few now?" Although the voice wasn't loud, everyone heard it clearly with their cultivation, and they were all shocked. Then, a woman's voice came from inside, "Sir, it's not good for you to kill people right after taking over." There was a woman on Obedient Island? Everyone looked at each other. They didn't know that Miss Mu was on Obedient Island. Damn it! Who's outside? Why are you making so much noise so early in the morning? Can't you let me sleep? A loud curse came from inside the house, and then a majestic and terrifying aura surged out of the house, as if it wanted to devour the whole world. In an instant, it shrouded the hundreds of people in the air dozens of meters away. A series of extreme negative emotions such as indifference, despair, and death intertwined to form a terrifying aura. Even the lords of the various countries, including Pei Fong, couldn't help but shiver. They all moved to resist it before they felt better. Everyone's pupils shrank, and a look of horror appeared on their faces. Oh my God! Is such a terrifying aura still human? Chapter 7:16. Before seeing him, his aura had already seized the opportunity. Everyone became nervous. From the tone of this person's voice, he did not seem to be a kind person. Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan, and Ouyang De looked at each other speechlessly. They did not know where Bai Chongqun had found such a powerful person to take over as the torture envoy. In any case, it was definitely not Wen Lanfeng, because the aura this person exuded was not Wen Lanfeng's aura at all. At this moment, the terrifying aura suddenly and quickly retracted into the house below. Everyone's eyes immediately focused on the door of the big house in the center of the island. They saw a man in gray walking out with his hands behind his back. He squinted at the group of people above and asked indifferently, "Who was shouting here just now?" Judging from the voice, it was the person who had just cursed in the house. Everyone's first reaction was to check this person's cultivation level, but no one could see through it. Therefore, everyone's eyes focused on Pei Fong and the other two, hoping to find some clues from their expressions. However, the three of them were also completely speechless. Everyone was immediately shocked. To be able to make Pei Fong and the other two speechless, this person's cultivation level was obviously higher than theirs. The newly appointed torture master of the demon realm was actually another unfathomable peerless master. How could they live? But who was this person? Why had they never seen him before? Everyone was speechless, their hearts pounding in fear. Yu Qianzhou glanced at everyone expressionlessly and said aggressively, "Are you all mute? Or do you think I'm easier to bully than Bai Chongqun?" The gloomy and terrifying aura began to spread from his body again, and it was even more intense, giving people a feeling that he was about to fight. "Niu Yud, he's Niu Yud," someone suddenly said hoarsely in the air. It was none other than the Lord of the Purple Spike Kingdom, Shangguan Taiping. Although the lords present all knew of Niu Yud, none of them had seen him. Even when they were close to each other in the cornucopia, Niu Yud rarely came out, so no one had seen him. Only Shangguan Taiping's disciple, Yu Lan, had been with Niu Yud for a long time and had reported Niu Yud's general appearance. After seeing this person's appearance, coupled with Niu Yud's signature terrifying aura, he immediately determined that this person was Niu Yud. Most of them had heard about Niu Yud's terrifying aura, and after Shangguan Taiping's reminder, they suddenly realized what was going on, and they were even more shocked. If it was before, they would not have been afraid of him, even if Pei Fong, Ouyang De, and Qi Jiujuan gathered together. Unfortunately, before Yin Baikong died, he mentioned that Niu Yud was from the immortal world. The group wanted to cry but had no tears. This Bai Chongqun was too ruthless. Not only did he not want to be the torturer, but he even dragged someone from the celestial world to take over his position. That was too awesome. This fellow was not much better than Bai Chongqun. He had the nickname of Ruthless Judge. Just by listening to his nickname, one could tell that he was not a soft-hearted person. Yu Qianzhou was confused. He pointed at Shangguan Taiping and said, "Who's that? How do you know me? I don't think I've ever seen you before." Shangguan Taiping awkwardly cupped his fist and said with an apologetic smile, "My disciple, Yulandu, has served you for some time." "Oh. So you're Yulandu's master?" Yu Qianzhou nodded in understanding, as if he knew Yulandu. Pei Fong, who was trying his best to shrink his body to make himself less conspicuous, immediately cupped his fist and said with a smile, "So it's Senior Nyo who has taken over the position of the demon realm torturer. This is the blessing of the cultivation world. We've come to congratulate you. I hope we didn't disturb you." Yu Qianzhou's gaze swept over. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Damn fatty, I can tell that you're the one who was yelling just now. A mere late-stage soul formation cultivator dares to come here and yell? I think you must be tired of living." His words were filled with a murderous aura. Pei Fong was so scared that his heart was trembling. He wanted to cry but no tears came out. "When did I yell? I was just greeting him politely. Don't be unreasonable just because you have a higher cultivation, okay?" However, he could only keep his words to himself. The other party was so unreasonable. If he said it out loud, he would really be tired of living. Hence, he tried his best to put on an amiable smile and waved his hands. "Senior Nyo, you've misunderstood us. We're only here to congratulate you on becoming the torturer. We really didn't yell. Perhaps I was too excited to see you just now, so I spoke a little too loudly and disturbed your peace. Please forgive me, Senior. No wonder this damn fatty could live until now." He was really flexible and shameless. Yu Qianzhou glared at him and said indifferently, "I've misunderstood? Is there something wrong with my ears?" "No, no." Pei Fong waved his hands repeatedly. "Senior, you have an immortal body. How could there be something wrong with your ears? I was born with a loud voice. Please forgive me, Senior." Many people looked at Pei Fong with sympathy and pity. This guy had always been reasonable when he met the strong. He had always been unreasonable when he met the weak. Now, he was the one getting his comeuppance. Hearing him say that, Yu Qianzhou's expression softened. He snorted and said, "I knew it. People always praise me for being wise and powerful. How could I have misunderstood them?" Everyone was speechless. This Nyo Yud was a fool who liked to listen to flattery. Pei Fong's eyes brightened and the fat on his face trembled. He gestured with his hands and feet as he said passionately, "Senior is not only wise and mighty, you are also a jade tree in the wind, a peerless genius that surpasses the ancients and dazzles the contemporaries." Before he could finish flattering Nyo Yud, he could not continue. He saw that Nyo Yud was staring at him coldly as if he was looking at a fool. "Damn fatty, do you think I'm as stupid as you? How dare you use such words to fool me? Are you tired of living?" Yu Qianzhou asked in a low voice. Pei Fong was immediately dumbfounded. Many of the feudal lords' faces turned red as they tried to hold back their laughter. This Nyo Yud was temperamental. He was really hard to please. Pei Fong's shameless act was completely useless. He was probably going to be out of luck today. Just then, a woman in white walked out of the house. She held a fruit platter in her hands. There were fresh fruits of different colors on the platter. The fruit platter was placed in front of Yu Qianzhou. She smiled and said, "Mister, eat some fruits to calm down. There's no need to lower yourself to their level." Everyone took a closer look and realized that she was actually a tree demon. Her appearance was not bad, but she was not stunning. Yu Qianzhou plucked a grape from the fruit platter and tossed it into his mouth. As he chewed, he asked, "Lady Mu, how does Bai Changchun deal with these trespassers?" Everyone was shocked. If they really dealt with them according to Bai Changchun's method, everyone would be out of luck. Hence, everyone looked at Lady Mu with pleading gazes, hoping that she would be merciful. Especially Pei Fong, whose face was filled with anticipation. Lady Mu's beautiful gaze swept across everyone. She smiled at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Mister, there are exceptions to everything. Moreover, these people are here to congratulate Mister on taking over the position of torture envoy. Speaking of which, they have good intentions. There's nothing wrong with that. Why don't you be merciful and let them off this time?" If they dare to trespass again, you can deal with them according to the old rules. What do you think? Everyone immediately looked at Lady Mu with gratitude. Then, they looked at Niu Yud anxiously. Oh! Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He plucked another grape and tossed it into his mouth. After chewing a few times, he spat out the skin and reached out to touch Lady Mu's fragrant shoulder. His palm slid under her neck. He pinched her chin and asked with a smile, "Why are you siding with an outsider? Have you taken a liking to one of them? Otherwise, why would you speak up for them?" Lady Mu immediately knelt down in fear. Trembling, she said, "Mister, please understand. Lady Mu has never seen them before. How could I have taken a liking to them? Lady Mu is really thinking of Mr. wholeheartedly. If Mr. doesn't believe me, I'm willing to die to prove my sincerity." She was still smiling just a moment ago, but now she was trembling in fear. Everyone who saw this felt a chill run down their spines. From her actions, it could be seen that this Niu Yud was definitely a murderous and temperamental person. Otherwise, this woman wouldn't be so frightened. Many of them wanted to escape. However, no one wanted to take the risk until the last moment. Because no one was confident that they could escape from the hands of this person from the immortal world. The scene of Yin Baikong dying at the hands of the underworld messenger was still fresh in everyone's mind. Ah! Look at what you're saying. How can I bear to let you die? Get up. Niu Yud personally helped the kneeling Lady Mu up. Then, he tilted his head to look at the crowd and said indifferently, "Today, for the sake of my maidservant, I'll let you off. However, if anyone dares to barge in again, it means that they don't respect me. When that time comes, it'll be useless no matter who begs for mercy." "We don't dare, we don't dare." Everyone replied timidly. They finally heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that they had passed today. Speaking of which, they really had to thank this tree demon called Lady Mu. Unexpectedly, Niu Yud snorted coldly again and said, "But rules are rules. You have to pay the price for breaking them. Otherwise, how can I maintain my prestige as a torture envoy? If word gets out, won't people laugh at me for being inferior to Bai Changchun?" Everyone's hearts were in their throats again. They didn't know what price he wanted them to pay. They stared nervously at Niu Yud, who lowered his head and pondered. "How about this?" Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his head and looked at the crowd. He said sinisterly, "According to the number of people, each of you will pay 200 million upper-grade spirit stones. Those who pay can scram. Those who don't, leave your life behind." Then, he said to Lady Mu, "Since you've pleaded for mercy for them, you'll be the one to collect the money. 200 million upper-grade spirit stones per person in exchange for their life?" The various feudal lords looked at each other. They recalled Niu Yud's past of swindling money from the ghost manor. They finally confirmed that this fellow was someone who loved money. "Yes." Lady Mu bowed and accepted the order. She rose into the air and flew in front of Pei Fong. She looked at Pei Fong without saying anything. It was as if she was telling him to do as he saw fit. The fat on Pei Fong's face twitched. 200 million upper-grade spirit stones was too much. However, when he saw Niu Yud staring at him coldly from below, a chill ran down his spine. He immediately squeezed out a smile and took out a storage bag. He offered it with both hands and said, "Thank you, miss. Here are 200 million upper-grade spirit stones. Please take a look." Chapter 7:17. The price was a little high, but compared to his life, and he could afford it, 200 million high-grade spirit stones was really not a lot. However, he felt very aggrieved. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have come all the way here to pay for humiliation. Wait. Everyone was shocked and looked at the person who spoke. All of them were shocked. At first, they felt the pain of paying such a large sum of money, but now, they were worried that Niu Yud would go back on his words. Niu Yud pointed at Pei Fong and said, "He is the leader. He was loud and disturbed my sleep, so he is an exception. I will add another 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Everyone else is the same." He was really overbearing. However, Yu Qianzhou naturally had his own thoughts. Some people. They needed to be taught a lesson, especially these thick-skinned, black-hearted, and sly old foxes. If you pretended that nothing had happened and let them go for nothing, they might suspect that you had a guilty conscience. In the end, they might turn around and repeatedly test you. Towards these people, he had to maintain an appropriate amount of pressure to make them feel fear and pressure, not giving them the chance to think nonsense. He had to put on a high profile and clearly let them understand that he was more powerful than them and could take their lives at any time. The more he pressured them, the more they would be afraid of him. Of course, there had to be a limit to pressuring them. He couldn't force them to do something desperate. Therefore, he chose Pei Fong to make an example out of him. He couldn't pick a pushover at this time. By suppressing the most powerful one, he would naturally scare the others. As for why he wanted each of them to take out 200 million high-grade spirit stones, it was because when Yu Qianzhou was on Xian Island, he found close to 800 million high-grade spirit stones in the storage bags of Hua Zongming and the other two. It seemed that Hua Zongming and the others weren't the most powerful among the feudal lords. If they could carry so much money with them, these people definitely couldn't be any worse. Yu Qianzhou did an average calculation and estimated that each of them could take out 200 million. After all, these people were not ordinary cultivators, but local moneybags. Although a mere 1 or 200 million was a huge amount, it was not enough to hurt these local moneybags. Therefore, they should be willing to take out their money to save their lives. When Pei Fong heard that he wanted to add another 100 million, his expression became complicated. No matter how rich he was, it wasn't easy money that he picked up from the streets. Asking him to take out another 100 million just like that would be painful. After all, it wasn't 1 or 2 million, but 100 million. People were different. Pei Fong was Pei Fong, not Yin Bai Kong. If it was Yin Bai Kong, he would probably take the initiative to give another 100 million, and he would even find an opportunity to send more money in the future. He wasn't afraid of Niu Yud asking, he was afraid that Niu Yud wouldn't accept. Seeing him hesitate, Lady Mu turned to look at Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows and said expressionlessly, "Damn fatty, you're not willing?" Pei Fong was startled and smiled awkwardly, I'm willing." Very quickly, he took out another storage pouch and offered it with both hands. He really refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. After Lady Mu finished counting, she went to Qi Jiujuan who was standing beside him. Qi Jiujuan silently took out a storage pouch. Therefore, it was O Yangda's turn again. These three standing at the front were naturally the unluckiest. They set an example for the people behind them and took out their money. Yu Qianzhou was secretly delighted. This was a huge amount of wealth. However, on the surface, he said expressionlessly, "Those who paid, scram. Don't wait for me to change my mind and regret it." Needless to say, these three late-stage soul formation cultivators didn't want to stay here anymore. Pei Fong smiled with his bleeding face, cupped his hands and said, "It's my honor to be able to meet Senior Niu today. We will take our leave now. Before you leave, listen carefully. From now on, I will take over by Changchun's matters. If anyone violates the old rules, they won't be as easy to talk to as they did today." Yu Qianzhou waved his sleeve and shouted, "Scram!" The three of them nodded speechlessly. Then, they shot into the sky and quickly flew away. After these three people took out their money and left, the others didn't have any temper. They all prepared their spirit stones in advance and waited for Lady Mu to come and collect the money. Those who paid hurriedly ran away. No one dared to stay. Who knew if this fickle Niu Yud would go back on his words? Therefore, Some people even took the initiative to pay first and then quickly leave. There were fewer and fewer people around. Some people were even shocked because they didn't have enough spirit stones with them. They hurriedly found someone to borrow them. If they were too late and everyone left, who could they borrow money from? That could kill people. Not long after, the feudal lords who came with ulterior motives didn't get to see the excitement they were looking forward to. Instead, they were all ruthlessly slaughtered. The most unbearable thing was that they took out their own money and gave it away for free. They even had to say thank you to the woman who collected the money. How could they endure this? As a result, they walked away with their faces covered in grime. When Yu Qianzhou saw that the sky had returned to its tranquil state, he returned to the large house, feeling very pleased with himself. Then, he sat down on the mat. Not long after, he saw Lady Mu come in with a large cloth bag. She placed it in front of him and opened it, immediately revealing a large pile of storage bags. Lady Mu looked at Yu Qianzhou with respect. She really admired him. It turned out that Mr.'s name, Niu Yud, was so famous outside. He could scare so many soul formation experts to this extent. It was obvious how powerful his hidden cultivation was. It was no wonder that he could take over the demon domain. She had always thought that Yu Qianzhou had hidden his profound cultivation, but she didn't know that there was another reason. You put on a good show today. Yu Qianzhou first praised Lady Mu. Then, he looked at the pile of storage bags and rubbed his hands excitedly. How many are there in total? Lady Mu came back to her senses and said with a smile, there are a total of 133 people. 200 million for each person. Together with the extra 100 million from that fatty, it's a total of 26. 7 billion superior grade spirit stones. Waha! Yu Qianzhou laughed wildly. He suddenly pounced on the storage bags and gave them a warm hug. He almost burst into tears. I'm rich. This demon domain torturer is really poor. When Bai Chongqun left, he didn't leave a single spirit stone behind. Now, he suddenly became rich. Yu Qianzhou, who was lying on the storage bag, really felt sorry for his master. With his master's ability, he could easily extort 1 billion from each of the countries. A few hundred countries would be hundreds of billions. However, his master was too pure. Otherwise, his successor would be the richest man in the world. What a pity. After the excitement, Yu Qianzhou sat back in his original position. He stared at the pile of storage bags in front of him and shook his head with a sigh. What a pity. Only about 100 out of more than 300 lords came. If all of them were here, we would have made a fortune. Lady Mu chuckled and thought to herself, Sir is too greedy. But it's not bad to have so many. Yu Qianzhou pointed to the storage bags in front of him and said, take one. As the housekeeper of Obedient Island, how can she not have money? Lady Mu was stunned. She knew that it was not good to disobey Yu Qianzhou's words. Hence, she thanked him and took one. Then, Yu Qianzhou waved his hand, and the pile of storage bags in front of him disappeared. They went to the Utopia treasury guarded by Bai Suzhen. At this moment, the sound of someone flying quickly came from the sky. Someone had landed on Obedient Island. Lady Mu did not think much of it because she believed that with Sir's abilities, what couldn't he handle? However, Yu Qianzhou's expression changed slightly upon seeing this. He was worried that some of the deity transformation stage lords had noticed something was amiss and had returned to settle the score with him. While he was worrying, a person had already appeared at the door. It was none other than Nongzhu. When Nongzhu saw Yu Qianzhou, she and Yu Qianzhou were stunned at the same time. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He wondered why Nongzhu had rushed over. Had the matter with Viburnum Fairy been resolved so quickly? Nongzhu was shocked when she saw Niu Yud. Then, she remembered that Niu Yud was Yu Qianzhou. You. Why are you here? Yu Qianzhou wanted to ask him about the matter with Viburnum Fairy, but he changed his words. Nongzhu's gaze paused on Lady Mu for a moment, and her eyes became a little sharp. Seeing that she was sitting so close to Yu Qianzhou, she seemed a little unhappy. It was not because she was worried that there would be an ambiguous relationship between them, but because when Bai Changchun was here, this woman did not dare to come into the house easily. Did she become unruly after Bai Changchun left? In Nongzhu's subconscious, Obedient Island and this house represented Bai Changchun, and no one could blaspheme them. Lady Mu naturally knew that Nongzhu's status in Obedient Island was not ordinary and she was not an outsider. Being stared at by Yu Qianzhou, she felt a little guilty and hurriedly got up. She bowed to Nongzhu and said, "Sir, I'll go out first." She turned around and bowed to Nongzhu, and then walked out quickly. Nongzhu looked back coldly, and then stared at Yu Qianzhou and snorted, "Don't lose the dignity of the torture envoy of the demon ghost region." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "I don't have the ability to maintain my dignity. Why don't I pass the position of torture envoy to you now? Don't talk nonsense here." Nongzhu sat next to him angrily. Looking around at the quiet surroundings, she asked suspiciously, "Where are Pei Fong and the others? Didn't they come?" "They came. I just drove them away not long ago," Yu Qianzhou said proudly. "You drove them away? Don't talk nonsense." Nongzhu suddenly came to her senses. She pointed at Yu Qianzhou's face and said, "You scared them away with the identity of Niuyud? How could this work? It doesn't matter what method I used. As long as it can solve the problem, it's a good method," Yu Qianzhou said proudly. He decided to keep the matter of making a fortune a secret for the time being. Otherwise, he was afraid that this old man would blackmail him. Nongzhu thought for a while and nodded slowly, saying, "It seems that I worried too much. But this is also good. After the news that Niuyud has taken over the demon ghost region is spread, at least for a period of time, no one dares to disturb the demon ghost region. I can also make use of this time to seize the opportunity." Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou asked curiously, "Seize the opportunity for what?" Nongzhu was silent for a while and said, "I'm going to do closed-door training for a period of time." Chapter 7:18. Yu Qianzhou laughed. His master was right. This old man had finally made up his mind to break through his cultivation. "That's not right." Nongzhu suddenly slapped her thigh and pointed at Yu Qianzhou's nose. "With your cultivation, we left Xian Island right after each other. How did you arrive at the demon region before me? There must be something behind this. Tell me honestly." Yu Qianzhou was startled. This was really hard to explain. He did come back before Yu Qianzhou, and not just a little bit earlier. He had already slept soundly on the lap of a beauty. He rubbed his nose and smiled. "I've cultivated a magic art for escaping. I'm good at speed. That's why I came back earlier than you." Since he couldn't explain it clearly, he could only use self-deprecation to keep it a secret. Nongzhu looked at him from head to toe. She said doubtfully, "No wonder you're so good at escaping. What magic art is it? Tell me." You'll know when you have the chance." Yu Qianzhou smiled perfunctorily. Seeing that he didn't want to tell her, Nongzhu didn't turn on him. She stood up and stared at him in silence for a while. Then she said slowly, "I trust Bai Changchun's judgment. You'll have to rely on yourself from now on." She took out a jade archive and threw it to Yu Qianzhou. "I've set up a message formation in the purple bamboo forest. There are coordinates in the jade archive. You can look for me if you need anything. At least, I won't leave the purple bamboo forest for a while. You're going back to the South Sea now." Yu Qianzhou stood up and followed Nongzhu to the door. After stepping out of the door, Nongzhu said with a serious expression, "Once Bai Changchun leaves, you won't be able to hold on for long. Sooner or later, you'll be exposed. I have to calm down and break through my cultivation to protect myself. If one day, the demon region really. At least the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea can be your home. Yu Qianzhou laughed and said, I'm not as pessimistic as you think, am I? Nongzhu didn't want to argue with him, so she raised her hand and said, Be careful, I'm leaving. Wait. Yu Qianzhou stopped him and took out 2 storage pouches. These are gifts for Zi and Furong, one for each of them. Nongzhu was startled when she received it. She then injected her divine sense into it to see what it was. After seeing it, she was stunned for a long time, and the muscles on her face twitched. There were 200 million high-grade spirit stones in each of the 2 storage bags. This was the first time he had seen someone give money to a woman as a gift. Moreover, he was very generous, giving 400 million high-grade spirit stones in one go. Nongzhu gradually came to her senses. She gritted her teeth and asked, Tell me honestly, how much money do you have? Yu Qianzhou waved his hand disapprovingly and said, It's not a lot, it's just so. It should be enough to spend in this lifetime. If it's not enough, I'll just earn more. Nongzhu was speechless. The SOSO from this money grubber's mouth must be a frighteningly huge amount. It was better not to know, lest she was provoked. He was a rich man. He watched as Yu Qianzhou took out another jade archive and inserted something into it. Then, he took out 2 porcelain bottles and handed them to Miao Yi, saying, One of the bottles contains the limit-breaking pill, and the other contains the 7 treasures pill. There's a method to use it in this jade archive. Help me bring it to Furong. It can help her raise her cultivation level to the early stage of tribulation passing. Nongzhu took it and asked suspiciously, Didn't you say that this thing can poison people to death? Why did you give it to Furong? Although he knew that Yu Qianzhou wouldn't harm Furong, he still had doubts and couldn't help asking. There are real and fake pills. Yu Qianzhou explained weakly. Nongzhu suddenly became furious and said, How dare you sell fake pills to harm people? Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes and said, Which eye of yours saw me sell fake pills? You can't talk nonsense. You, go. Nongzhu was so angry that she flung her sleeve and flew away. Looking at the black dot disappearing into the horizon, Yu Qianzhou shook his head and smiled bitterly. Then, he frowned and continued strolling. A cool breeze caressed his face, and the grass was fragrant. Before he knew it, he had arrived at the edge of the 1,000 Miles Lake. Looking at the sparkling surface of the lake, he couldn't help but be startled. His eyes turned, and no one knew what he was thinking. Without hesitation, he jumped into the lake. Splash! Water splashed on the surface of the lake, creating ripples. His figure disappeared from the surface of the lake. Under the water, Yu Qianzhou occasionally spat out a string of bubbles from the corner of his mouth. He dived head first into the bottom of the lake. The water was clear, and schools of fish could be seen swimming in the lake. Some of the bolder fishes even ran over to play around him as he dived, diving down with him. After diving for nearly 100 meters, the light in the water gradually weakened, and it became dark in front of him. The water pressure was getting stronger and stronger. The fish following him didn't seem to be deep-water fish. They all swung their tails and swam back upstream. Yu Qianzhou also felt a little uncomfortable. He pointed his finger downward and began to use the water formula. The surrounding water quickly separated, and his whole body seemed to be wrapped in a bubble, sinking rapidly. The surroundings became darker and darker, so dark that not a single ray of light could be seen. The surroundings were extremely quiet, giving people a terrifying sense of oppression. Yu Qianzhou himself didn't know how deep he had dived. He estimated that it was about 1,000 meters. He felt that using the water formula to repel the water pressure was also getting stronger and stronger. The huge pressure around him kept squeezing, and he gradually felt that he couldn't bear it. It was obvious that with his current cultivation, it would be difficult for him to withstand too much pressure when using the water art. Fortunately, the water formula was miraculous. It could strip the oxygen contained in the water for him to breathe. Otherwise, it would be even more uncomfortable. Just as he was hesitating whether to give up, a faint white light appeared below him. Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. It seemed that he was not far from the target he wanted to check out. He gritted his teeth, endured the pressure, and dived deeper. The light below grew bigger and bigger, but his face was also flushed red. The pressure was too great, and he couldn't bear it. But he still persisted. When he started to feel dizzy, Yu Qianzhou didn't dare to go any further. Looking down, the target was only about 100 meters away from him. Unfortunately, the pressure was too great, and he couldn't get close at all. This was also because he could use the water formula to repel the water. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he wouldn't be able to reach this position. At the bottom of the tranquil lake lay a serene pearl. Under the backdrop of the darkness, it emitted a gentle white light, illuminating the surrounding topography of the lake. There were rare deep-water fishes leisurely swimming around. Rather than calling it a pearl, it was more like an upside-down bowl. It was white and smooth like jade, but in reality, it was just a light barrier. This light barrier at the bottom of the lake was at least a few hundred meters wide and 100 meters tall. It was in a semicircular arc. From the surrounding topography, it could be seen that this place was originally a valley. The surrounding shadows rose and fell like a mountain range. Not far away, there was a tall, round pillar-like mountain. Yu Qianzhou looked up the pillar-like mountain and was immediately shocked. Judging from the direction, this should be the lowest base of Obedient Island. He felt that it was a little strange. Most mountains were cone-shaped. How could a mountain grow like this? The circumference of the top and bottom was about the same, and it was as straight as a pillar. Furthermore, this height wasn't low. It was at least 2 kilometers, right? Such a scene couldn't help but make people think of the wooden fish and the wooden mallet used to strike it. The light barrier was like a wooden fish, and the pillar supporting Obedient Island was like the wooden mallet used to strike it. How could there be such a strange topography? Yu Qianzhou was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. After hesitating for a while, Yu Qianzhou felt like his ears were ringing and the dizziness was getting stronger. The distance between him and the water had already shrunk to less than half a foot. If he stayed any longer, he would be in danger. Yu Qianzhou looked down at the light barrier and shook his head in pity. According to Bai Changchun, the entrance to the demon realm was sealed by the immortal emperor and the underworld king, and the light barrier was a seal that the myriad swords demon monarch added later on. In other words, the entrance to the demon realm was sealed by 2 seals. Even with Bai Changchun's cultivation, he couldn't break through the outer layer of the myriad swords demon monarch seal. Yu Qianzhou originally wanted to see if he could go in, but he didn't expect that even approaching would be difficult. After working for a while in vain, Yu Qianzhou helplessly disappeared into the water. A big bubble broke into several pieces and floated up. On the mountainside behind the mountain god temple where the leaders of the Green Gang and Hong Gang were hiding, Yu Qianzhou stood in front of the plain and stared at the mountain god temple below. Because of the raging war in Wuxia, Shi Wenguang's army had already reached the vicinity. The common people were in a panic and didn't dare to go out. Thus, the mountain god temple seemed very deserted. Gu Qingyun and Hong Qi stood behind him and reported the recent developments in Wuxia. 1/3 of Huaxia's territory had already been captured by Shi Wenguang's army, and the poor people who had been oppressed by the imperial court for a long time could no longer bear the corvée labor and taxes brought by the war, so they all formed groups and rose up in rebellion. For a time, the uprising of the poor people was like a spark that started a prairie fire, making the precariously dynasty even worse. If there was no strong support, the dynasty would collapse, and defeat would be set in stone. On Wuxia Island, the forces of various countries increased the mobilization of manpower, and a large number of cultivators continuously gathered on Wuxia Island. In the other countries that were adjacent to Huaxia, there were also a large number of cultivators gathering. Other than the direction of the demon ghost region, they had already surrounded Wuxia. Looking at the movements, the forces of various countries were preparing to launch a large-scale attack on Wuxia's cultivation world. The entire Wuxia's cultivation world was as anxious as ants on a hot pan. All of this was within Yu Qianzhou's expectations. With Bai Chongqun gone, the various countries would definitely officially make their move. Master. I heard that our Grandmaster is the #1 expert in the world who has already gone to the East Holy Land. Hong Qi's eyes suddenly lit up as he interrupted. Yu Qianzhou made a non-committal "n" sound, and Hong Qi instantly revealed an extremely annoyed expression. It seemed like he was blaming his master for not bringing him to meet his Grandmaster, but he did not dare to be presumptuous in front of his master. Gu Qingyun glanced at Hong Qi and continued to report, all the sects in Wuxia are in danger, and they're all worried that the soul formation experts of various countries are about to make their move. Also, there are quite a number of cultivators in our two sects, so we should also prepare early to avoid being implicated when the time comes. You're worrying too much. Yu Qianzhou thought for a while and said, some time ago, the new torture master of the demon ghost region, Niu Yud, already warned them that the soul formation experts of various countries don't dare to come to Wuxia for the time being. Think of a way to spread this news so that the various sects can prepare for war with peace of mind. Don't make it so that they surrender before the fight even starts. Humph. Anyway, they're all tired of living. If there's something wrong with their cultivation, it's better to die a little more. Chapter 7:19. Gu Qingyun and Hong Qi looked at each other. Then, Yu Qianzhou continued, if they fight, as long as they don't provoke you, don't get involved. Anyway, your subordinates are all wandering itinerant cultivators. They don't have a fixed territory and are just making a living in the cracks. No matter who wins, you won't get any benefits. So, don't be used by them. Who cares who wins or loses? Continue being bandits. Yes. There's nothing bad about being a bandit. Freedom. You don't have to listen to others and you'll still have food to eat. The two of them looked at each other speechlessly again. Gu Qingyun coughed and said, Boss, the 10,000 demons and moon sect seem to be sending people to look for you. Let them look for them. Yu Qianzhou didn't think much of it. I promised to help them deal with the soul formation experts who came to bully us. But the soul formation experts haven't attacked us yet. What's the point of looking for them? I can't be bothered with them. After giving instructions to the two of them, Yu Qianzhou returned to Utopia directly. He stood alone in a remote area and closed his eyes in deep thought. After a long time, he opened his eyes with a puzzled look, and his brows furrowed into a deep furrow. There was something that worried him. He didn't know what was going on with Bai Chongqun in the East Holy Land. He searched for Bai Chongqun's location in the East Holy Land several times, but he actually stopped at the same place and didn't move at all. He didn't know if it was because of the special environment in the East Holy Land or because Bai Chongqun was trapped. Either situation was easy to explain. He was just afraid that Bai Chongqun had met with an accident and died. His worried gaze gradually became determined. He decided to take the risk and go to the East Holy Land to see what was going on with Bai Chongqun. Otherwise, how could a living person not move for a long time? It couldn't be that he went to the East Holy Land to meditate, right? That was too nonsensical. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Xian disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, Yu Qianzhou quickly looked around vigilantly. If something was wrong, he would immediately flash back. However, what he saw and heard in front of his eyes left him in shock. The sun was shining brightly in front of him, and the salty sea breeze was blowing gently. Waves were crashing against the shore in front of him, and the tide was rising on the white beach beside him. All of this indicated that he was standing by the seaside. Not far behind him, there were even some cacti that were as tall as a human growing on the slope. Carefully observing his surroundings, Yu Qianzhou became more and more confused the more he looked. He scratched his head in puzzlement. Could this be the legendary Holy East land that was said to be extremely dangerous? The sea view is not bad. His gaze suddenly landed on an island in the distance. The more he looked at it, the more familiar it seemed. No matter how he looked at it, it looked like old ancestor Nanming's Xianxian Island. Holy East Lands? Xianxian Island? When Yu Qianzhou came to his senses, he was stunned. Could this be the Eastern Holy Land opposite Xianxian Island? After observing for a long time, he finally confirmed that he was standing in the Eastern Holy Land opposite Xianxian Island. It was probably because of the formation that sealed the Eastern Holy Land. When looking from Xianxian Island, it was a vast expanse of whiteness, but when looking from the inside, it was as clear as day. This was similar to the defensive formations used by some cultivation sections. However, the strange thing was that he did not see Bai Changchun nearby, but he could clearly sense that the silver ball he had given him was here. Otherwise, he would not have been able to teleport here. In order to accurately lock onto the location of the silver ball, Yu Qianzhou returned to Utopia once again. In the blink of an eye, he appeared where he had disappeared, but this time, he was 2 meters away from his original position. Yu Qianzhou stared at the white beach under his feet in a daze. His expression became abnormally terrified, and in the blink of an eye, he saw large droplets of tears flowing down his face. He suddenly cried out in grief, "Master! Who did this to you?" He immediately knelt on the ground and began to frantically dig the sand. After digging more than a meter deep, he dug out a storage bag from the hole. He continued to dig with all his might, but he could not find anything. After a while, he sat down weakly in the 2-meter deep hole, hugging the storage bag as tears flowed down his face silently. He did not know what kind of expert Bai Changchun had encountered, to the point where even his corpse could not be found. If there had not been an accident, with Bai Changchun's cultivation, how could he have lost his belongings like a 3-year-old child? After feeling sad for a while, he wiped away his tears and rummaged through the storage bag. He wanted to see if his master, the world's #1 expert, had left behind any valuable inheritance. This was what he thought. After all, the dead had passed away, and the living had to continue living well. If the dead could leave behind any treasures for the living, it would also be a form of comfort for the living. However, he was greatly disappointed to find that his master was as poor as ever. He only poured out the 10 or so small silver balls and a jade archive that he had given him. He did not expect the world's #1 expert to die so cleanly. However, when he saw the jade archive, his eyes lit up again. He guessed that the jade archive contained some kind of peerless cultivation method. Even if it was Bai Changchun's own cultivation method, it would be enough for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. There was indeed something recorded in the jade archive, but it was not a cultivation method. Instead, it was a message that Bai Changchun had left for him. Yu Qianzhou, my disciple, snow, rain, wind, and frost have lasted for 2,000 years. The great Tao is long and I walk alone. Carefree and without fear, clad in a green robe, I set foot in the East Pole. Yu Qianzhou was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He immediately cursed in exasperation, F***ck. Old man, you're so ruthless. Why are you walking alone? If I run into any trouble, I'll still need your help. He put away the items and leaped out of the 2-meter deep sand hole. Then, he ran up the slope by the sea that was covered with scattered cacti. He looked into the distance, but he could not see a single person. Behind the slope was a vast expanse of yellow sand. Tall cacti grew everywhere, and their bodies were covered with thorns. It was as messy as Yu Qianzhou's mood. Bai Changchun did not bring the silver ball with him. Moreover, it had been so many days since the incident, and he had no idea where it had gone. How could he possibly find it? Yu Qianzhou let out a long sigh and sat down on the sand weakly. He felt like crying but had no tears. If he had known this would happen, he would not have taken over the demon's domain. He hung his head and muttered to himself, "You have no conscience. To think that I cried so much for you." Bai Changchun's action of leaving behind the storage pouch was simple. He did not want Yu Qianzhou to find him. From his short message, it could be seen that he did not want Yu Qianzhou to save him and bring him out of the Holy Land of the East, no matter how dangerous it was. Especially the third sentence, carefree and fearless. It was clear that he did not want to have any worries, and that he should go about his business and not look for him anymore. He wanted him to let go of the burden that he had been carrying for 1,000 years and go out on his own. Very cool. Typical Bai Changchun's arrogance. However, this was undoubtedly cutting off his own path of retreat. He could only charge forward without turning back, no matter how dangerous it was, unless the heaven and earth formation that sealed the Holy Land collapsed. Without his biggest backer, Yu Qianzhou's mind was blank. He did not want to think about anything. Because just thinking about it made his scalp go numb. Once Niu Yud's identity was exposed, those soul formation experts who were deceived by him would not let him go. He would probably hide in Utopia for the rest of his life. As for Shi Wenguang and the others in the secular world, they would definitely end up very, very badly. I don't want to think about anything. Lying on the beach and basking in the sun, he crossed his legs and hummed a crooked song. There's no drunken sunset in the coconut grove, just a sea of blue. Sunshine, beach, waves, cacti, and an old captain. After singing it many times, he suddenly stopped and got up. He patted his butt and looked around. He sneered and said, "You're relaxed after throwing me the burden. No way. No matter how big the Holy Land is, it's only this big. I don't believe I can't find you." He looked around and suddenly landed on the cactus that covered the sand. His eyes lit up, and he clicked his tongue. "This thing doesn't exist in Utopia, but I can dig some back and plant them. It'll add to the scenery." He got to work immediately. The black fire saber appeared in his hand. He dug a few of them and moved them back to Utopia. When he dug the sixth one, he stabbed the saber into the sand. Suddenly, a red liquid shot out from the place where the saber was inserted, spraying him all over. "Damn it! What's this?" Before he could finish speaking, he smelled a strong stench. He was furious. Since he had already dirted himself, he stabbed the black fire saber into the ground. Every time he stabbed, a stream of red liquid would shoot out from the place where the saber was inserted. Such a demonic action was more or less a way to vent his anger. Bai Changchun's departure without saying goodbye had indeed made him a little unhappy. But at this moment, the ground under his feet suddenly shook violently, causing him to lose his balance. Suddenly, he felt that the ground was much higher, and there were roars coming from below. What was that? Yu Qianzhou was instantly dumbfounded. He tried his best to stabilize his body, not knowing what was below. Suddenly, 3 thick, black, vine-like things shot out from the sand within a radius of 12 meters. They were wriggling toward him. Yu Qianzhou's gaze turned cold. He waved the black saber in his hand and destroyed them like they were mud. The stench of red liquid splattered everywhere, and chunks of things fell from the ground. The rest quickly retreated back into the sand. In the end, the roars from below became even louder, F***ck. When Yu Qianzhou was angry, there was no reasoning. He had always believed in striking first to gain the upper hand. He had already determined that there was definitely a monster below. He stabbed the saber in, not even reaching the saber handle. Fresh red and smelly blood spurted out. Yu Qianzhou pulled out the saber, and a ball of fierce black flames appeared on the saber. He had used the black flame to burn the blade. Woo-woo. A deafening howl came from below. The violent tremors caused the ground to sink, and then it suddenly rose up, throwing Yu Qianzhou into the air. Yu Qianzhou, who was in the air, was covered in blood. He held the black fire saber in his hand and stared down like a god of death. Chapter 720. Sand flew up like rain, and a huge monster popped out from the sand. For a moment it was hard to see what it was, but more than a dozen huge tentacles stabbed at Yu Qianzhou in the air. Yu Qianzhou quickly flew out, but after flying for a short distance, his expression changed. He felt that while he was using his cultivation, the true essence in his body was being consumed several times. Alarmed, he quickly landed on a sand dune dozens of meters away. At this time, he did not have time to investigate the reason for the rapid consumption of true essence in his body. He turned around and stared at the monster that popped out from the sand. He saw that after the monster popped out of the air and spread its tentacles, its arm span was almost more than 30 meters. It was like a big umbrella opened in the air, setting off a storm of sand that fell from the sky. Big octopus? Yu Qianzhou looked at the big guy that popped up in the air and then fell down, stunned. The monster with more than a dozen huge tentacles looked very much like an octopus, but it seemed that an ordinary octopus did not have so many tentacles, nor was it so big. The strangest thing was that its body seemed to be covered with black scales the size of a palm. After letting out two painful howls, the big guy fell straight from the air and smashed into the sand, motionless. One of the huge tentacles fell 2 meters in front of Yu Qianzhou. At the end of the tentacle, there was a sharp black claw that looked like a fang. A burst of black smoke came out from the top of the big octopus's head, and its huge body was withering at a visible speed. Then, it spread to the dozen or so huge tentacles. Not long after, the huge monster turned into a pile of ashes on the sand. This was the terrible result of being burned by the black fire. Yu Qianzhou did not know whether this big guy was an octopus or not. In any case, he did not know what kind of monster it was. He looked at the black fire extinguished saber in his hand with a dignified gaze. Using the fire spell to maintain the saber did not consume much true essence, but now that he carefully examined it, he found that the true essence consumption was greater than usual. At first, he did not notice anything unusual, but when he fiercely circulated his true essence while flying, he found that something was wrong. Previously, he had thought that it was the monster's doing, but now that the monster was dead, he discovered that revolving the fire art to maintain the saber was still consuming his quintessential essence. Clearly, it had nothing to do with the monster. What the hell was going on? Yu Qianzhou looked around suspiciously, but didn't find anything unusual, so he put away the broadsword. As a result, Yu Qianzhou stared blankly for a moment before suddenly shooting up into the sky. After circling twice in the air, he suddenly understood everything and quickly landed on the ground. It turned out that as long as he used his cultivation technique, he would discover that there was an unknown force in the world that was quietly extracting the true essence from his body. The more true essence he used, the more true essence would be extracted from his body. In short, the consumption was proportional to the extracted true essence, which was 1-to-1. In other words, the consumption of true essence to execute a technique here was double that of outside. Yu Qianzhou found it hard to understand. How could such a strange thing happen in the same world? Could it be because of the heaven and earth great formation that sealed the eastern Holy Land? Just as he was puzzled, he saw a cloud of dust billowing in the distance. There were more than 10 people riding fast horses galloping on the sandy ground, galloping towards him at high speed. Yu Qianzhou scratched his head in confusion. Weren't the people sealed in the eastern Holy Land the experts of the netherworld and immortal world? Why were they riding horses at such a tortoise-like speed? In a short while, more than 10 people arrived in front of him. They slowed down and circled around him. Yu Qianzhou sized them up in surprise. It seemed that their expressions weren't very friendly, and they were staring at him with hostility. However, what made him feel the most strange was that these people were obviously mortals. They were very different from the experts in the Eastern Holy Land he had imagined. The more than 10 people on horseback all had strong and sturdy bodies. They had bronze-colored skin and were very muscular. Their long hair was tied into many whips, and they even wore feathers on their heads. Their necks and wrists were adorned with animal tooth jewelry. Most of the skin on their bodies was exposed, and only some of the important parts were covered with cloth. On their waists were crudely cast knives, and there were even some who carried animal tooth spears on their backs. These people's dressing reminded Yu Qianzhou of the Native Americans in his previous life. Their styles were quite similar. One of them made Yu Qianzhou's eyes light up slightly. It was actually a beautiful woman. She had a strong and voluptuous body. Her two slender thighs with beautiful curves clamped on the horse's belly. Her full breasts were wrapped in animal skin. Coupled with her bronze-colored skin, she was filled with a wild beauty. It made people want to conquer her with a single look. However, she wore a five-colored feather on her head, and the knives on her waist were of much better quality than the others. She also had the appearance of being supported by the crowd. She seemed to be the leader of these people. If one looked carefully, they would discover that on the naked arms of these people, there was a similar pattern drawn. It was exactly the same as the monster with many tentacles that Yu Qianzhou killed. A man next to the wild beauty suddenly waved his hand and pointed 100 meters away. He exclaimed, "Garland, look." Everyone's gaze followed. Yu Qianzhou also couldn't help but look back. He discovered that it was the ashes left behind after he killed the monster. The two men rode their horses and galloped over. They circled around the pile of ashes and examined it. Then, they quickly galloped back. One of them nodded and said, "Garland, it should be the remains of a man-eating octopus, but it seems to have been burned to ashes by someone. The commotion just now should have come from here." In an instant, everyone's eyes were fixed on Yu Qianzhou. They were somewhat in awe. The wild and sexy beauty asked, "Did you kill the man-eating octopus?" Her gentle voice was mixed with undisguised brutality. It gave people a pure and natural feeling. It was very pleasant to listen to. Yu Qianzhou shook his head without hesitation and said, "I didn't kill it. The person who killed it has already flown away." He spread his arms and made a flying gesture. It was as disgusting as it could be. The reason why he didn't admit it was because he felt that he shouldn't take responsibility for everything before he understood the situation. It wasn't safe. In addition, from the pattern on these people's arms, he deduced that the dead monster might be their totem. If he admitted it, he might offend them. The group of people looked at each other and exclaimed, "Immortals." Yu Qianzhou's eyebrows trembled slightly when he heard that. After the shock, the beauty called Garland asked doubtfully, "Which tribe are you from? How can you barge into our tribe's territory with your bare hands?" Yu Qianzhou was speechless. He felt very conflicted. Damn it! Is this the Eastern Holy Land? Why does it feel like I've come to a primitive society? He scratched his head and thought for a while. He pointed at his head and said, "I lost my memory. I can't remember anything. After I woke up, I found myself here." He lied casually, but this was the least credible lie in the long history of his lying. There was no other way. He didn't know anything about the situation here. Although the people in front of him were all mortals, who knew what kind of background they had. "Lost your memory?" Garland said in a daze. The group of people on horseback were dumbfounded. They looked at each other. Someone said to the person beside him, "Elder Meng from the tribe seems to have lost his memory because of his old age. He can't remember anything." "Big brother. That's called Alzheimer's, okay." Yu Qianzhou was speechless. Another person said, "I heard that someone in the tribe fell off his horse and hit his head on a rock. In the end, he also couldn't remember anything." Garland waved her hand and stopped everyone's discussion. She stared at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Looking at your gorgeous clothes, your attire isn't ordinary either. You should be someone from a faraway city. If you're from a nearby tribe, we'll definitely know you." She looked around and continued, "There are often ferocious beasts around here. It's not safe for you to be here alone. Why don't you go back with us first? When you remember anything, we'll decide what to do." What a kind person. Even if he lost his memory, he would still believe it. Yu Qianzhou nodded repeatedly in agreement. He was still worried about not understanding the situation here. It would be best to go back with them and ask for some information. Unexpectedly, a man beside Garland stared at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Garland, this person's eyes are flickering. One look and you can tell that he's not a good person. If we bring him back, what if he's a spy sent by some tribe? The fence gathering is about to begin. We have to prevent anyone from betraying us warriors. Besides, how are you going to explain to the tribe elders if you suddenly bring a stranger back? You're the one who can tell that you're not a good person." Yu Qianzhou cursed inwardly, but pretended that he didn't understand. Seeing that the others also nodded in agreement, Garland seemed a little hesitant. But when he saw Yu Qianzhou's obedient and pitiful look, he immediately said decisively, "Bring him back first and have someone guard him. I'll explain to the tribe elders. If they don't agree, it won't be too late to drive him away. Bodo, give him your horse." The one called Bodo was the strong man who stopped Yu Qianzhou from going back. He nodded helplessly and said, "All right." He jumped off the horse, pulled the reins over, and stuffed them into Yu Qianzhou's hands. Garland asked, "Do you know how to ride a horse?" Yu Qianzhou nodded. Garland nodded and said, "Follow us." With that, he took the lead and galloped away. Bodo climbed onto the back of another man's horse. The two of them rode side by side, and the group galloped away. Yu Qianzhou turned back to look at the indistinct Xian Island in the distance. He jumped onto the bareback horse without a saddle, pulled on the reins, and kicked the horse's belly with his heels. The horse's hooves kicked up yellow sand, and he quickly chased after the group of people in front of him. After about 15 minutes of running, they finally ran out of the yellow sand. Green grass began to appear around them. Not long after turning around a valley, a vast forest appeared in front of them. The group of people directly rode into the forest. After passing through the deep forest along a winding path, their eyes suddenly opened up. A wide lake as clear as a mirror lay quietly in the depths of the forest. It made them feel like they were in a fairy tale. Chapter 721. In the lush green grass beside the lake, there was a path that looked like gray ribbons. A dozen or so riders formed a line and galloped along the path to the foot of the short mountain ahead. It was a grayish-brown stone mountain. With Yu Qianzhou's cultivation, he could see at a glance that there were many caves on the mountain. There were people going in and out of the caves, so it was obviously used for living. As they ran past the lake, Yu Qianzhou, who was at the back, was a little dumbfounded. He couldn't help but look back. This was because there was actually a group of naked men and women happily bathing in the lake near the foot of the mountain. Those women had their breasts exposed without the slightest scruple. In groups of 2 or 3, they were stirring the clear lake water and singing loud, beautiful, and aphrodisiac songs. F***ck, this is such a good place. Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. As he looked at the people in the lake were also looking at him curiously. The reason was probably because they were curious to see him wearing so many clothes. When the group reached the foot of the mountain, they all dismounted. Bodo came over to lead his horse. Yu Qianzhou looked around and saw that the grass at the foot of the mountain was surrounded by a fence. There were many horses tied to the fence, and the group of people were tying their horses to it. Inside the fence, there were many crude tents made of animal skin, and many children were running and playing among them. Breathing in the fresh air filled with the smell of nature, and then looking at such a simple style, Yu Qianzhou sighed with emotion. Garland, who had tied the horse, walked over to him. She stood in front of him and looked at him for a while before saying, "Don't run around. I'll report to the elders." If they agree to let you stay, then you can stay. Otherwise, they'll drive you out. Understood. Yu Qianzhou nodded with a smile. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at Garland's body. Only then did he realize that this woman's figure was even better when she was standing. She had a strong waist, full breasts, and perky buttocks. Coupled with the wild aura she exuded, she was truly pleasing to the eye. Garland didn't care about his lecherous eyes at all. He waved his hand, and two men came out of the people who came with him. They crossed their strong arms in front of their chests and stared at him from both sides. They seemed to be monitoring him, afraid that he would run away. Yu Qianzhou didn't mind. He watched as Garland walked into a cave at the top of the mountain. Then, he glanced at the two people on his left and right, turned around with his hands behind his back, and looked leisurely at the people bathing by the lake. He thought to himself, looking at it with pure appreciation, it's really primitive. However, what was even more primitive was yet to come. Not long after, the men and women who were bathing in the lake walked up to the shore hand in hand and hugged each other, kissing and touching each other without restraint. Soon after, pairs of them fell on the grass by the lake and began to copulate on the spot. In an instant, the quiet lakeside was filled with gasps and moans. F***CK. Group, field team. Yu Qianzhou's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He was truly dumbfounded. The situation was far beyond his expectations. Shoo. Shoo. Suddenly, he heard a loud and clear whistle. Yu Qianzhou silently turned his head and looked to both sides. He saw that the two strong men were beaming with joy. They put their fingers in their mouths and whistled hard. They even spread their limbs and made bodybuilding poses towards the lakeside, activating the strong muscles on their arms. The most terrifying thing was that the children who were originally running and playing inside the fence were also clinging to the fence, waving their arms and shouting at the people who were copulating by the lake. It was a little like a cheerleader in a sports competition. And the men who were working hard by the lake also worked even harder. The more intense gasps and moans intertwined with each other, lingering and lingering. Oh my God. I've seen everything in my life, but I've never seen this. Yu Qianzhou's head drooped down powerlessly. He was completely speechless by these people. And when the two men who were monitoring him saw his dejected look, they suddenly looked proud. One of them walked to Yu Qianzhou's side, showing off his burly body that was nearly 2 meters tall and compared it with Yu Qianzhou's small body, revealing a look of infinite contempt. Yu Qianzhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this moment, Garland ran down from the mountain. She was slightly stunned when she saw the dejected Yu Qianzhou, and then looked at the two men who were demonstrating by the side. She couldn't help but giggle. Yu Qianzhou raised his head and looked at her. He shook his head and sighed slightly. He really didn't know what to say. Who would have thought that a man beside him would suddenly jump in front of Garland and dance his hands and feet to show off his robust body? He kept dancing provocatively as if he was courting her. As a result, Yu Qianzhou was once again dumbfounded. Yu Qianzhou was even thinking, could it be that any man or woman here could do that? Garland patted his strong chest and pushed him away. The man immediately became listless. Garland walked to Yu Qianzhou and said with a smile, "Someone who lost his memory, can you still remember your name?" Yu Qianzhou was taken aback. Yu Qianzhou. What a strange name. Garland mumbled and said, "The elders said that women can reproduce, and children are the future of the tribe. As for men, they have to bear the responsibility of protecting and raising the tribe. Our tribe doesn't take in useless men. If you can hunt a wolf or any ferocious beast in the forest to prove that you are a real man, then our tribe will be willing to take you in temporarily. Otherwise, we won't waste food on you and will expel you. Do you have the courage to accept this test?" Yu Qianzhou looked at himself up and down. Did he look so weak that he couldn't even kill the alpha wolf? To be honest, he didn't want to stay here at all. Mingling with this group of primitive people was too unbecoming of his identity as the dignified Phantom Region's torture master. However, he didn't know how deep the waters of the Eastern Holy Land were. He had to find a foothold and spend some time to understand it. Otherwise, he might get into trouble if he just barged around randomly. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he touched his nose and said, "Accepting the test is not a problem. I would like to ask, what tribe are you from?" He subconsciously looked at the group of people fighting in the wild by the lake. "Cannibals," Garland said with a smile. In the end, it gave Yu Qianzhou a fright. He said in shock, "Cannibals?" The two men at the side immediately laughed out loud, as if they were looking down on Yu Qianzhou's cowardice. "Don't be afraid." Garland also chuckled. She pointed at the totem on her arm and said, "This is a man-eating octopus. They have been multiplying since a long time ago. They originally lived in the sea, but for some unknown reason, they were confined even though the sea was so close to them. The animals on land could no longer enjoy the embrace of the sea, and these man-eating octopuses slowly got used to life on land. They like to hide under the sand and hunt people or animals that pass by. Because they are the strongest and most ferocious beast in our tribe, they have become the symbol of our tribe. This is why we are called cannibals, not because we eat people." "Oh." Yu Qianzhou nodded to show that he understood. Then he asked, "Then how do I accept the test? Do I go hunting in the forest now? You must be accompanied by our people to see you kill a ferocious beast with their own eyes." As Garland spoke, she suddenly pointed and said with a smile, "Tomorrow, you will go hunting with them." Yu Qianzhou turned his head and saw a group of people coming out of the forest on one side, returning with all kinds of beasts they had hunted. They were carrying the beasts on their backs, hands, and shoulders. It could be said that they had returned with a full load. Especially the strong man at the front, who was carrying a big brown bear on his shoulder. It was probably a few hundred kilograms. Even Yu Qianzhou was a little surprised to see that a mortal could carry such a heavy thing. He must be really strong. When the group returned, it immediately attracted the cheers of the children around them. They all ran to greet them, and at the same time, they wanted to see how many kinds of prey they had hunted today and what the most ferocious prey was. The man carrying the big brown bear walked directly towards them. Suddenly, he threw the prey on the ground with a bang, and even the ground shook. This burly man, who was more than 2 meters tall, walked so far with a heavy load, but his face was not red, and he was not panting. He was looking at Yu Qianzhou curiously with a pair of big eyes. "This is Bodo's brother, Boli. He is the strongest warrior and man here." Garland smiled and introduced him to Yu Qianzhou. Then he introduced Boli. "This is a poor man with amnesia. His name is Yu Qianzhou. He will go hunting with you tomorrow. If he can kill a ferocious beast, the elders will temporarily take him in." Boli was stunned, and then he pointed at Yu Qianzhou and laughed boorishly, "Even the thinnest man here is stronger than you. You can hunt ferocious beasts with that body of yours? If your neck is bitten off by a beast, you will lose your life. I advise you to leave this place." Yu Qianzhou really wanted to go up and beat him up, but he had a faint smile on his face as he said, "I can give it a try. If I really get my neck bitten off by a wild beast, that's my fate." He imitated the way the people here spoke. Boli was still shaking his head. Garland said unhappily, "Boli, the elders have agreed." Boli was stunned. He looked at Yu Qianzhou and nodded, "All right then. We will take you with us tomorrow." Then he turned to the men and women who had finished their business by the lake and waved his arms, shouting, "Woo!" The men and women ran over and helped to unload the prey from the horses' backs. They were very happy to see so many prey. At this moment, Boli suddenly picked Garland up and walked to the lake with her in his arms. Garland also hooked her arms around his neck and gazed at him affectionately. Yu Qianzhou was speechless. He could only watch as the two of them went to the lakeside and stripped off the few pieces of clothing they had left to bathe together. After taking a bath, they unscrupulously did vigorous exercises by the lake. After seeing this unrestrained scene, Yu Qianzhou's expression seemed to be used to it. However, the thoughts he had about Garland at the beginning had been thrown out of his mind, and he felt a little nauseous. He looked into the distance, wondering where Bai Changchun had gone. Chapter 722. With the return of the hunting team, the men and women of the tribe immediately became busy. Slaughtering, disemboweling, skinning. For a moment, the originally fresh air was filled with the stench of blood and stench. The women set up a big pot to light a fire, and the men threw the big pieces of meat directly into the pot to cook, and some directly roasted them over the fire. The children, with small knives in their hands, worked together to pry open the beasts' mouths, and pulled out the sharpest fangs of the beasts. Someone carried a big bag of salt from the cave, smeared most of the remaining fresh meat with salt, pickled it on the spot, and then transported it to the cave to be stored in the shade. The various kinds of animal skins that were peeled off were also sprinkled with powdery substances, and dried in the sun. It was estimated that after processing, it could be made into clothes for them to wear. After a while, the smell of meat and stench coexisted in the air. The people of the tribe seemed to have smelled the most wonderful smell in the world, and the children happily jumped up and down. Yu Qianzhou sat alone on a small grassy slope at the side, looking at these easily satisfied people with a smile. Night fell, the bright moon rose in the sky, and the stars twinkled. Piles of bonfires were burning at the foot of the mountain, and the stench in the air had long dissipated, leaving only the rich smell of meat, which made people feel hungry. This tribe of only a few hundred people seemed to have turned out in full force at this time, all gathering at the foot of the mountain, dancing a rough dance around the bonfires. Only then did Yu Qianzhou realize that those who were qualified to live in the cave were women and children, and many of the women had big bellies. 6 rather old women dressed in the most colorful furs of wild beasts, with the brightest feathers on their heads. They were escorted to the flattest grassland, which was covered with soft animal skins, showing off their noble status. Just after the 6 old women sat down, the animal skin drum that had been placed on the side made a dong-dong sound, cheerful, warm, and full of passion. Garland, the most beautiful and sexy woman in the tribe, was the first to jump into the middle of the bonfire, her seductive hips and waist twisting like a water snake, instantly igniting a night of revelry. Men, women, old, young, and children began to sing and dance to their heart's content. The wild singing resounded through the night sky, and the unrestrained dancing was unrestrained. A feast that belonged to this tribe began. The delicious meat was taken down from the pots and grills, and the most delicious parts were cut off and presented to the 6 old women. Then, everyone began to eat heartily. The fragrant liquid in the urns was also drunk by everyone. A simple and happy life. Yu Qianzhou, who was excluded from the crowd, sat alone on the grassy slope outside the fence, watching everything with a smile. Someone noticed his loneliness. Galen brought him a piece of meat on a wooden plank, along with a hollowed wooden cup filled with fragrant liquid. "You must be hungry. It's for you." Galen placed it in front of him. Yu Qianzhou looked at the wild, sexy, and kind woman in front of him and said, "Thank you." He picked up the cup and sniffed it. It was really fragrant. He tried to take a sip, but found that it was sour and difficult to swallow. He grabbed the piece of meat and took another bite. It was a little overcooked. Other than the fragrance of the meat, there was only the salty taste. The taste was really not flattering. He really did not know how these people could eat so happily. For him, who was used to eating delicious food, it was a little funny, but in order to show respect to the kind hostess, he forced himself to finish it one bite at a time. Galen, who had been staring at him, smiled and said, "I'll get you some more." Yu Qianzhou hurriedly waved his hand and said, No, I'm already full. I really can't eat any more." Galen frowned and said, "You only ate so little. No wonder you're so thin." Yu Qianzhou smiled awkwardly. Galen sat next to him and asked curiously, "You really don't remember anything about your origins?" Yu Qianzhou smiled and shook his head, indicating that he really did not remember. He then pointed to the 6 old women in the tribe and changed the topic. "They are your tribe elders?" "Yes." Galen nodded. Yu Qianzhou asked curiously, "Why are the tribe elders all women? What about your tribe leader? Is there no tribe leader?" In his mind, there must be a tribe leader in every tribe. Galen patted her chest and said, "I am the tribe leader. Women are the most respected, so the tribe elders are naturally women. The women who can become tribe elders are people who have made great contributions to the tribe. They are all the women in our tribe who have the most children." Yu Qianzhou was stunned. After the two of them talked for a while, he finally understood the situation of this tribe. It turned out that this tribe was a small matriarchal society. Women had the highest status in the tribe. Especially the women who had the most children, they were respected by the entire tribe. Just like the 6 old women, they were respected by the tribe as tribe elders. And Galen could become the tribe leader because she was the most beautiful and sexiest woman in the tribe. She could attract the most men. This seemingly ridiculous thing had its own explanation. Women who could attract the most men to have sex with were the most likely to have the most children. This kind of women enjoyed a status second only to the tribe elders. At the same time, they had the right to choose the strongest men to have sex with. They wanted to give birth to the strongest men or the most beautiful women. Then the most beautiful women could attract more men to have sex with, and the strongest men could protect the tribe and hunt more prey to raise the tribe. Based on this logic, beautiful women made great contributions and carried the heavy burden of strengthening the tribe. They really did have the right to become the tribe leader. In short, in order to reproduce the next generation, this tribe highly advocated sex between men and women. It could be done at any time, and no one would look down on it or feel ashamed. Instead, the men and women who did not do it would be looked down upon by everyone. When a woman appeared in the tribe that was recognized as more beautiful or sexier than Galen, then Galen's position as tribe leader would be handed over. Although it was ridiculous, there was no doubt because the more beautiful woman could attract the stronger men to have sex with. Yu Qianzhou was speechless. The relationships in this tribe were a little messy. To put it bluntly, it had even disrupted ethics. The children born were raised by the entire tribe. In fact, it was impossible to tell who the father of the child was. As long as the woman was willing, any man in the tribe could have sex with her at any time. However, if the woman refused, the man had no right to force the woman. This was because women had a very high status in the tribe. After knowing this, Yu Qianzhou could only shake his head and smile bitterly. It was not good for him to make any comments. There was naturally a reason for it to exist. While the two of them were sitting here talking, there were already many aroused men and women rolling around on the grass. Yu Qianzhou really found it a little hard to accept. He could only silently say, "Get used to it." "Galen, what did you mean by the fence meeting you talked about during the day?" Yu Qianzhou asked. Galen sized him up with a curious gaze, as if to say, "You don't even know this. You really have lost your memory." After organizing his thoughts, he said, "The most honorable place in the entire continent is the Immortal City. There are many powerful immortals living there. Below the Immortal City are many great feudal lords, and below the great feudal lords are the feudal lords. Within the territory of every feudal lord, there are many tribes. Our tribe belongs to the territory of La City's city lord, and the city lord is also the feudal lord. The entire continent holds a fence meeting once every 3 years. First, there will be a division competition in the feudal lord city. The top 100 strongest warriors will be qualified to go to the great feudal lord city to participate in the finals again. The top 100 warriors in the finals will have the opportunity to go to the Immortal City. We don't know what happens after going to the Immortal City, but it should be to serve the immortals. Yu Qianzhou frowned and muttered, "Don't tell me there are no benefits to participating in this kind of competition?" "Of course there are benefits," Galen explained. "If the tribe's warriors can win in the preliminary competition and enter the top 100, the tribe can get a prize. If they win in the finals, they can get even more prize money. With the prize money, we can buy enough salt." "Buy salt?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. "The sea is sealed, and we can't get close. Naturally, we can't get salt. Only the people of the immortal city have a way to get salt. Salt is very expensive. The surplus of our annual hunting harvest is sold in the city, but the money we earn isn't even enough for the tribe to use for a month. So only the tribe's warriors can participate in the fence meeting and win. With enough prize money, they can buy enough salt for the tribe to continue living," Galen said. "So that's how it is." Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly, then suddenly asked, "Will the victorious warriors come back?" "The warriors who win in the preliminary competition will get the right to live in the city and can continue to earn money to buy salt for the tribe. The victorious warriors in the finals will go to the immortal city to enjoy life and won't come back." Galen said this with a complicated expression. "Oh." Yu Qianzhou seemed to have a sudden realization. The dangerous East Holy Land that was rumored to be in the cultivation world had already formed its own social system. The so-called immortals in the immortal city were probably the immortals who were sealed here in the immortal world. Weren't there people from the underworld? Where did they go? Did they all die? Such powerful people shouldn't die so easily. Yu Qianzhou patted his head and said, "Why do I vaguely feel that other than the immortals in the immortal city, there are some more powerful people, but I just can't remember." "You're talking about the people who live in the underground world, right?" Galen reminded. "Underground world? I think so, I can't remember." Yu Qianzhou smiled awkwardly. Galen immediately explained, "Legend has it that there's an underground world under the mainland. A group of people who are as powerful as immortals live there, but they don't like to see the sun, so they rarely show up on the mainland. You should be talking about them, right?" Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly. It seemed that the so-called people from the underground world were the people from the underworld who were sealed here. Chapter 723. Thanks to Chief Garland's care, he wasn't allowed to sleep in the open. Instead, he was given a tent. In fact, it didn't matter if Yu Qianzhou wanted a tent or not. When he refused, Garland looked at the moon in the sky and pointed to the lake. "Every time there is moonlight, the crocodiles in the lake will climb to the shore. It's dangerous for you to sleep outside the fence." "Crocodiles?" Yu Qianzhou said in disbelief, "Why do you bathe in the lake when there are crocodiles?" Garland smiled. "These crocodiles are called moonlight crocodiles. They only come to the surface of the lake at night to breathe. They only climb to the shore when the moon appears. Usually, they hide deep under the lake. You will be fine as long as you sleep inside the fence. They rarely break through the fence. Even if they break through, the fence will block their movements. We can avoid them in advance." "Rarely?" Yu Qianzhou frowned. "They can still break through. You live by the lake, aren't you worried at all?" At this point, he suddenly stood up and stared at the surface of the lake with bright eyes. Others might not be able to see it, but with his cultivation, he saw a huge whirlpool in the distance. A huge silver-white figure dived into the lake. If it hadn't moved like this, it would have been difficult to distinguish the figure from the moonlight reflected from the lake. Yu Qianzhou said in a deep voice, "Chief Garland, there is something in the lake." Garland pulled his clothes and signaled him to sit down. She smiled. "Did you see something silver-white? That is the moonlight crocodile. In fact, it is safer for us to live by the lake. If bad people sneak in at night, they will often be attacked by the moonlight crocodiles hiding in the grass. Don't you think they are like the guardian of our people?" Since she said this, Yu Qianqiu sat down and relaxed his vigilance. He asked suspiciously, "Have the moonlight crocodiles never attacked you?" Garland frowned and muttered, "I heard from the older generation that there was a moonlight crocodile attack about 200 or 300 years ago. However, I haven't seen it since, so there shouldn't be any problems." 200 or 300 years ago? Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows twitched as a thought flashed through his mind. Could it have something to do with the Eastern Holy Land opening once every 300 years? However, this was only a momentary thought, and he himself could not be sure. Garland suddenly pulled him and pointed to the lake, indicating for him to pay attention. Yu Qianqiu looked over. In fact, he could see far more clearly than Garland. He saw ripples on the surface of the lake. A group of 2 to 3 meter long, silver-white, short-limbed fellows climbed onto the shore and dived into the surrounding bushes. There were hundreds of them. In fact, even if they didn't sneak in, the moonlight on their outer appearance would become a natural camouflage under the moonlight. As soon as they crawled into the bushes, they stopped moving. It was as if they were waiting for their prey. If humans or animals trespassed, they would really die under their ferocious fangs. This made Yu Qianqiu click his tongue in wonder. There were indeed all kinds of strange things in this world. There was actually a silver-white crocodile. However, he had some doubts. Was the huge white shadow in the lake really them? Could it be that they surged in a group and he did not see it clearly? The moon was high in the sky. After indulging to their heart's content, the clansmen returned to rest. The bonfire turned into red charcoal, and the red light gradually faded and gradually extinguished. Inside the fence, there were a few more braziers for illumination. There were also a few clansmen holding torches and patrolling around at night. Garland, who had left and returned, led Yu Qianqiu into the fence and came to a small tent in the center. He said, "You can sleep here for the time being tonight. Don't run around if you have nothing to do, lest you get injured by the arrows of the night patrol clansmen." This tent could only sleep one person, but Yu Qianqiu did not have any objections. In fact, it did not matter if he had a tent or not. At this moment, Boli, who was half naked, came again. He directly carried Garland away and entered a tent at the foot of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu listened to the panting and moaning sounds in the surrounding tents and shook his head speechlessly. They were really a clan that worshipped tradition. He had learned something new today. Then, he also went into the small tent. The inside was covered with a layer of soft animal skin, so that people would not lie directly on the grass. Yu Qianqiu lay inside with his arms as a pillow and his legs crossed. He was not sleepy at all. His mind was constantly thinking about Bai Changchun. With Bai Changchun's character, he would definitely find an expert to fight when he came here, so the immortal city would definitely be his goal, or it could be said to be his ultimate goal. Because the top experts of the Eastern Holy Land would definitely be there, and Bai Changchun would definitely not be able to resist such a temptation. In other words, as long as he went to the immortal city, he would have a chance to find Bai Changchun and bring him back. However, he was unfamiliar with the place and did not have Bai Changchun's cultivation. If he rashly went to the immortal city, he would definitely not have a good ending. Just think about it. He could not even deal with a soul formation expert. How could he deal with a group of immortals? After thinking about it, his eyes suddenly lit up. If he could participate in the fence gathering, wouldn't he have a chance to go to the immortal city? Bang, walala. Suddenly, there was a chaotic sound outside, followed by screams. Someone shouted, "Help!" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He could already hear the sound of people running out of the surrounding tents. "The moonlight crocodiles are attacking us!" People kept shouting. Among them, there were the screams of women and the frightened neighing of fine horses. It was obvious that the outside was already in a mess. At first, Yu Qianqiu thought they were doing some kind of ceremony, but he suddenly sat up and dashed outside the tent. The moonlight shone like mercury. Many men raised torches, spears, and swords as they swarmed downwards. They saw hundreds of silver-white crocodiles rushing towards the crowd. The fence had long been knocked down by the crocodiles, and a few men were being dragged towards the lake by the crocodiles. The arrows, the spears, and the swords couldn't effectively cut through the silver-white skin that was like armor. They almost didn't cause any damage to these fierce amphibians. The attacks of the cannibals were basically ineffective. Instead, they were once again bitten by the swarming crocodiles, and a few people were dragged back. The light of the torches flickered, and screams mixed together, ringing through the night sky. Yu Qianzhou's eyes narrowed. He saw the huge white figure in the lake in the distance again, stirring up a huge whirlpool in the middle of the lake. Beside him, there were people rushing down with weapons, all trying to save their people who were being dragged and bitten by the crocodiles. Yu Qianzhou's face darkened. He still wanted to rely on the cannibals to bring him to the immortal city. If the crocodiles killed most of the cannibals, then the cannibals wouldn't be able to participate in the fence gathering. Wouldn't that ruin his plan? However, he didn't want to show his cultivation in front of the cannibals. As Yu Qianzhou's eyes flashed, a young man holding a spear suddenly tripped by the rope of the tent. The spear that swayed in front of Yu Qianzhou was pulled back by Yu Qianzhou. The young man jumped up and was still looking for his spear when he suddenly saw Yu Qianzhou, who was standing next to him, raise his spear and throw it with a whoosh. This spear, which was infused with true essence, whistled through the air and nailed to the side of the lake. It directly penetrated the head of a moonlight crocodile, and half of it was inserted into the ground. The clansman who had his leg bitten by the crocodile quickly opened the crocodile's mouth and hurriedly crawled back. The young man was stunned, and the clansmen who were fighting with the crocodiles by the lake were also shocked. They didn't know who had such great strength to actually shoot through the hardest head of the moonlight crocodile. However, they didn't have time to find this warrior. They desperately resisted the attack of the crocodiles. One after another, the clansmen who were passing by were suddenly stopped by the young man. The young man couldn't wait to collect the spears in their hands and ran in front of Yu Qianzhou. He held a dozen spears and said excitedly, "For you." Yu Qianzhou was startled, but he didn't hesitate. He grabbed a spear with each hand and threw them. Swish, swish. 2 spears whistled through the air and nailed 2 crocodiles that were dragging people to the ground. Yu Qianzhou waved his arms and threw a dozen spears in the blink of an eye. None of them missed their targets. Each spear killed a moonlight crocodile without any mishap. Moreover, the first ones that were killed were the crocodiles that were dragging people in their mouths. However, there were hundreds of crocodiles, almost equal to the number of cannibals. The people who had their spears snatched by the young man immediately reacted and scattered. It didn't take long for each of them to come back with a bundle of brand new spears. They untied the rattan ropes and held them by Yu Qianzhou's side. Yu Qianzhou didn't move and stood firmly in the same place. His 2 hands constantly manipulated the spears and threw them with a whistling sound. The spears accurately passed through the people in front of him who were fighting with the crocodiles. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 spears were thrown, and each one was fatal. In an instant, more than 100 crocodiles were killed. With his help, the cannibal warriors immediately rescued all the people who had been bitten by the crocodiles. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou was showing off his power, they didn't try to be brave and retreated one after another. The clansmen who were holding a bundle of spears immediately ran to the cave where the weapons were stored after the spears in their hands were thrown by Yu Qianzhou. The others took turns to hold the spears in their hands so that Yu Qianzhou could throw them. The spears cut through the night sky with a whistling sound. In the blink of an eye, the attacking moonlight crocodiles were all killed. They were like nails on a board, and they were all stabbed into the ground by the spears. The remaining dozen moonlight crocodiles were suddenly afraid, and they hurriedly turned around and crawled back. However, these short-legged crocodiles weren't very fast on land. Moreover, Yu Qianzhou was determined to kill them, so he didn't plan to let them go. More than a dozen spears flew out one after another, and they were all nailed to the grass. Not a single one of them was allowed to escape. The lakeside suddenly quieted down. About 50 meters away from Yuqianchou, there were hundreds of spears stuck in the ground. Each spear was aimed at a fierce moonlight crocodile that was 2 to 3 meters long, and its head had been pierced through. The cannibals' eyes widened as they looked at this unbelievable scene. Chapter 724. Later, no one knew who took the lead in cheering. As a result, all the clansmen standing around raised their arms and cheered at Yuqianchou. Yuqianchou smiled faintly. With his own ability, killing these beasts was really nothing to be proud of. Suddenly, a delicate body broke into his arms and hugged him directly. Yuqianchou casually touched the smooth buttocks. He quickly pushed it away and saw that it was Garland, who was completely naked. Looking at this, it was estimated that when he was working with Boli just now, there was a sudden accident, and he didn't have time to put on those pitiful clothes. Garland looked at him with a fiery gaze. Yuqianchou looked embarrassed. He really couldn't tell who was taking advantage of who. However, he was really not used to hugging a naked beauty in front of everyone. He could only smile bitterly and shake his head at Garland. He didn't want to be the strong man that she fancied countless times. He didn't have the habit of sharing a woman with others. The cheering crowd ran towards the crocodiles that were nailed to the ground. Yuqianchou raised his head slightly, and his pupils suddenly shrank. He saw a wide wave of water rising from the middle of the lake, and it was quickly coming towards this side. Yuqianchou immediately shouted, "Stop, all of you, come back for me." This group of people really listened to him now. Sure enough, they stopped one after another. However, when they looked back, they were somewhat puzzled. They didn't know why he called them back. Was it because he killed the prey alone and didn't want to share with the clansmen? At this moment, there was a huge splash by the lake, and a huge silver-white figure directly jumped out of the water and soared into the sky. When the clansmen who ran to the front heard the movement, they looked back and saw the huge figure that blocked the moonlight. They were all immediately stunned. Yuqianchou waved his hand and pushed Garland away. He grabbed a few spears in each hand, poured a powerful cultivation into them, and threw them out. 6 spears formed a matrix in the air, and with a strong wind, they whistled and shot out, blowing out most of the torches in the hands of the people in front. Peng peng sounds rang out, and the huge figure that had just leaped out of the lake and was about to pounce ashore fell back into the lake, splashing water everywhere. The waves rippled in the lake, and the huge figure disappeared. The man-eaters finally understood why Yuqianchou had called them back. Hence, they all ran back in fear and stood behind Yuqianchou. Recalling the scene just now, all of them stared at the undulating waves of the lake in horror. "What is that? Have you already killed him?" Garland asked with a trembling voice behind him. Yuqianchou shook his head with a solemn expression. The others didn't see it clearly, but he did. It was a giant moonlight crocodile that was nearly 20 meters long and more than 4 meters wide. The moment the 6 spears hit it, they all shattered. They didn't penetrate its leather armor at all, only knocking it back into the water. When the water splashed, the giant moonlight crocodile's cold eyes shone with a red light. It stared at him with resentment before sinking into the water. This beast seemed to have gained intelligence. It seemed like it was about to become a spirit. That last glance seemed to be a grudge against him. A cold smile appeared on Yuqianchou's face. "Even if you don't hold a grudge against me, I won't let you go today, lest you ruin my plans, you beast. You still want to fight me in the water?" Without saying anything, he slowly walked toward the lake with his hands behind his back. Everyone looked at him blankly, only to see him slowly walk to the lake, wading into the depths of the lake. When the lake water reached his chest, he directly dived into the lake. He actually dived into the lake with such a terrible monster? Everyone looked at each other in horror. Then, they thought about the fact that such a monster was hiding in the lake where they usually bathed, and they all felt a lingering fear. After Garland's proud breasts rose and fell, he turned around and organized people to heal the injured clansmen. Many people were still quietly staring at the lake, not knowing when Yu Qianqiu would come out. As soon as Yu Qianqiu dived into the bottom of the lake, 8 azure fire flying swords immediately came out of his body and illuminated the surroundings. Using the water art, he swam quickly in the water without any effort. His speed was even faster than flying in the air. He felt like a fish in water. The 8 azure fire flying swords formed a green lantern that quickly moved back and forth in the underwater world, startling all kinds of fish in the water and causing them to flee in all directions. This lake wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. It was probably a kilometer in length and width, and the deepest part was estimated to be 300 to 400 meters. Ordinary people couldn't dive so deep, but it was nothing for Yu Qianqiu. However, Yu Qianqiu searched the entire bottom of the lake, but he didn't see the giant crocodile. Logically speaking, with such a conspicuous white color and such a huge body, it should be impossible for it to escape his sharp senses in the water when swimming within a radius of 1,000 meters. Could it be that there was another world in the water? Yu Qianqiu frowned as he swam quickly in the water, accompanied by a green shadow. Suddenly, he slowed down and slowly landed on a towering rock at the bottom of the lake. Standing on the rock and looking around at the pitch-black underwater world, Yu Qianqiu let out a cold snort. The 8 azure fire flying swords were vigilant of his surroundings. He slowly closed his eyes and let the lake water around him soak his body. Using the water art, his senses gradually became one with the lake water within a kilometer. Every drop of water seemed to become a part of his senses. In a split second, every corner of the lake couldn't escape his eyes. Even the tiny fish, prawns, and the slightest movement of the water plants were all detected by his senses. In an instant, the entire bottom of the lake was in his mind. If this lake was too big, he wouldn't be able to control it with his cultivation base. But underwater, it wasn't a problem for his senses to control the area within a kilometer. Huh! Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly opened. At the center of the lake, under the mud, there seemed to be a large living creature. But at this moment, an old and irritable voice transmitted to him through the lake water, "Little kid, you have already killed hundreds of my clones. Why do you still use your senses to chase after this old man? Don't go too far." Huh! It can actually detect my senses. Yu Qianqiu was a little curious. One must know that perception was completely similar to telepathy. It was illusory and could not be detected at all. Under normal circumstances, he couldn't use it at all. He could only use it in water, fire, and fog by using one of the 5 elements cultivation techniques, with the help of these mediums. Although it was magical, even he didn't know what was going on. In any case, it was completely different from the divine sense released by a cultivator. When he used his divine sense to check on others, or when others used their divine sense to check on him, both sides could sense it. But he had never heard of anyone being able to detect other people's senses. Yu Qianqiu slightly narrowed his eyes. With a swoosh, he scuttled to the center of the lake and floated 10 meters above the bottom. He used his senses to observe the bottom and replied to the location where he transmitted his voice. "You are that big crocodile? Looks like you have cultivated to become a spirit and can speak human language. Bullsh *T. The irritable voice transmitted again, "This old man has already left the ranks of the spirits 300,000 years ago and ascended to the immortal world. How can I allow you to sully me?" Yu Qianqiu was startled and said suspiciously, "Don't tell me you are an immortal." He actually believed it somewhat. If it was said that it was impossible in other places, but in the Holy East lands, it was not strange for immortals to exist. But, Bullsh *T, I am an immortal, and an immortal emperor-level immortal at that. The old voice was impassioned. As if it was such a glorious thing, it felt like it was reminiscing about the glorious past and looking back. Who the f*ck are you talking about? Immortal emperors are supreme beings in the immortal world. How can you chat with me here? Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly, don't think that you will be safe hiding down there. Watch how I kill you. Wait. The old voice shouted loudly, little brother, from what you said, you don't sound like someone with the cultivation of an immortal. Otherwise, you should be able to distinguish the cultivation of an immortal. But that's not right either. If you haven't reached the cultivation of an immortal, how can you control senses? Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows and laughed sinisterly. This old thing has changed the way he addressed me from little doll to little brother. His tone has also become much more polite. It seems like he is afraid that I will attack him. Don't give me that, I won't be swayed by force or persuasion. Yu Qianzhou cackled sinisterly. Today, let me, an early-stage tribulation-passing immortal, kill you, an immortal emperor-level immortal. Wait. You are only an early-stage tribulation-passing immortal? The old voice was filled with disbelief, or rather, disbelief. You have a problem with that? Yu Qianzhou did not hold back. With a swoosh, hundreds of green flaming flying swords appeared, illuminating the entire body of water. He wanted to make thousands of them, but the true essence consumption in this godforsaken place doubled, so he could only use them sparingly. Hundreds of flying swords were aimed at the ground below. The old voice immediately said anxiously, little brother, wait. Let's talk this out, don't be in a hurry to attack. Wait. I admit defeat, okay? Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly, there is no need to resort to insinuations in front of an honest person. How dare you lie to me? If you want to die, I will grant your wish. Watch me beat you, an immortal emperor, into immortal feathers. Before he could finish speaking, the old voice anxiously interrupted, and said with a sobbing tone, little brother, I really did have the cultivation of an immortal emperor. But in the battle with the demon lord of 10,000 swords 100,000 years ago, I was beaten to this point by him. Luckily, I managed to survive, and I am struggling at death's door. Otherwise, would not have ended up in this state. The demon lord of 10,000 swords? Yu Qianzhou was stunned, but he was really not in a hurry to attack now. A person who was qualified to fight with the demon lord of 10,000 swords was indeed not simple. He could not help but ask, old man, is what you said true or false? If you dare to fool me, do you believe that I will immediately pierce your heart with 10,000 swords, and then grind your bones into ashes after you die? I don't dare. The old voice sounded lucky to have escaped death, but at the same time, there was also a hint of desolation. Chapter 725. Yu Qianzhou stared at the mud at the bottom of the lake and realized that it was filled with old marks. He really did not know how the old man managed to hide there. When he used his perception to investigate, he did not discover any other entrances. He immediately snorted and said, old man, you really don't give me any face. Is there anyone who hides down there and talks to me like this? The old man laughed bitterly and said, if I could really get out, I wouldn't have to do this. The key is that I'm trapped here and I really can't get out. Don't talk nonsense with me. How did you get out just now? Yu Qianzhou frowned and shouted. The old man said helplessly, that was also my clone. My main body could not move at all. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He rubbed his chin with his hand. No one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, he pointed at the bottom of the lake. The surrounding lake water immediately stirred up an undercurrent and churned wildly at the bottom of the lake. The old man immediately said in fear, little brother, what are you trying to do? Yu Qianzhou couldn't be bothered with him and continued to do what he was doing. The silt that had accumulated at the bottom of the lake for who knew how many years was pushed away layer by the undercurrent. The clear lake water immediately became extremely turbid. Because of the mud and water plants, the undercurrent was immediately revealed. 6 tornado-like water pillars stirred wildly at the bottom of the lake. The turbidity gradually spread in all directions. Not long after, the clear lake water within a radius of 1,000 meters became extremely turbid. Under the moonlight, the surface of the lake rippled. It seemed that something unimaginable had happened at the bottom of the lake. The man-eaters all looked at the lake in fear. They did not know what terrifying thing was about to happen next. Everyone thought that Yu Qianqiu was fighting with the lake monster at the bottom of the lake. After spending more than 4 hours, Yu Qianqiu finally cleared away the tens of meters of mud at the bottom of the lake. The turbid mud was all filtered to the sides of the lake by him using the water art. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu was looking down with his mouth agape. He swallowed with difficulty, under the illumination of over 100 flying swords made of azure flames. A huge silvery white body that was over 100 meters long and over 20 meters wide was lying quietly at the bottom of the lake, motionless. This was a behemoth that he couldn't even imagine. It was a gigantic crocodile. Its silvery white skin was bumpy, as if it was wearing heavy armor. 2 rows of fangs were exposed at the front of its ferocious head, and its 2 bright red eyes were bigger than anyone else's. It was far beyond his imagination. 2 huge red eyes were moving around, sizing up Yu Qianqiu curiously. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. After a long silence, he asked, This is your real body?" He focused his gaze and noticed that on the back of the giant crocodile, where its forelimbs and neck intersected, there was a huge ancient long sword pierced directly into its back, nailing it to the bottom of the lake. The exposed part of the huge sword was 6 to 7 meters long, and the blade was about 3 meters wide. It was dark gold in color, and there was a faint golden glow flowing around it. He couldn't imagine who could use such a huge sword to fight. Could it be that the person using the sword was like this crocodile, a giant? Ah! Little brother, you've seen it all. Not bad, this is my territory. I've been buried at the bottom of this lake for over 100,000 years. I'm lucky to be alive. The giant crocodile sighed with an old voice. This scene was too shocking. Yu Qianqiu tried to calm down and asked with difficulty, "Who are you?" "Ah." The giant crocodile was still lying motionless at the bottom of the lake. The old voice came from its head. The underworld has 12 underworld generals, and the immortal world has 12 immortal monarchs. I'm one of the 12 immortal monarchs, Immortal Crocodile Monarch. People call me Lord Crocodile Monarch. This title was too big. It was even more unfamiliar than the Immortal Emperor or the Underworld Emperor. He had never even heard of them before. Yu Qianqiu was deeply shocked. He awkwardly smiled and said, "Earlier, you said, that, could it be that you really had the cultivation of an immortal emperor? Didn't you say that only one immortal emperor had that cultivation?" He was really afraid that this giant would suddenly go crazy. It was scary just thinking about it. Immortal Crocodile said sadly, as if recalling the past. In the immortal world, cultivation is divided into 4 levels: small immortal, exalted immortal, great immortal, and immortal emperor. In the underworld, cultivation is divided into 4 levels: underworld knight, underworld sage, underworld lord, and underworld emperor. They are all equal, and the strength of their cultivation is actually about the same. Each level is divided into 3 levels. Even immortal emperors are divided into early, middle, and late stages. In the immortal world, there are many people with immortal emperor cultivation, but only the 12 great immortal monarchs have reached the middle stage. As for the late stage immortal emperor, there is only one person, and only this person dares to call himself an emperor in the immortal world. He is Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly as if he was deep in thought. He looked at the huge sword that nailed him to the point where he couldn't move at all and said, "In that case, you're an extraordinary figure in the immortal world. To be able to. I presume that the sword in your body is the main reason why you're trapped, right?" "Yes, I was nailed to the bottom of the lake by this sword." I have been trapped for more than 100,000 years, Immortal Crocodile admitted. Yu Qianzhou asked suspiciously, you said you were beaten up by the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. Could it be that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, it is the Myriad Swords Demon Lord? Immortal Crocodile gritted his teeth and interrupted him. The sword that trapped me is one of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's swords. Otherwise, ordinary treasures would not have been able to trap me for so many years. Myriad Swords Demon Lord, one day, I will avenge this sword. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. It seemed that this old monster did not know that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was already dead, and still wanted to seek revenge. But thinking about it, the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was killed by the Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld outside the East Holy Land. The people trapped in the East Holy Land naturally did not know. Old monster, I'm afraid you will not have the chance to avenge yourself. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed. What do you mean? Do you want to kill me? Immortal Crocodile's red eyes turned, and his gaze landed on the hundreds of flying swords in Yu Qianzhou's hands. Little kid, who is the Myriad Swords Demon Lord to you? Yu Qianzhou noticed his gaze and immediately knew that he was thinking the wrong way. Immortal Crocodile probably saw him controlling so many flying swords at the same time and mistook him for the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's disciple. He shook his head and chuckled. Old monster, don't think the wrong way. The Myriad Swords Demon Lord has been dead for more than 100,000 years. How can I be related to him? The Myriad Swords Demon Lord is dead? Immortal Crocodile paused, then repeated. Did I hear wrongly? You said the Myriad Swords Demon Lord is dead? Yu Qianzhou sneered. So what if he is not dead? Are you a match for him? Don't worry. He is really dead. 100,000 years ago, he was killed by the Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld. Immortal Crocodile didn't believe him. Impossible, don't lie to me. The Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld fought the Myriad Swords Demon Lord more than once, and they never got the upper hand. The two of them could not kill him. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand disapprovingly and said, it's up to you whether you believe it or not. I don't know how he died, but I heard that he fell into a trap and was injured first. Later, the Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld worked together to kill him. Trap? Injured first? Could it be? Immortal Lord Crocodile muttered to himself. After a long time, he sighed and said, looks like what you said is true. This old man was wondering why Wang Jian still hasn't taken back his treasured sword after so many years. So he has already fallen. Sigh. He let out a long sigh. Seeing that he had understood, Yu Qianzhou couldn't be bothered to explain further. He stared at the giant sword on his back. Old monster, according to what you said, you are a top expert in the immortal world. Could a sword trap you? Could it be that there is something special about this sword? Knowing that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was dead, Immortal Crocodile, who had been trapped for so many years, seemed to be a little dispirited. He replied in an aged voice, Myriad Swords cultivation was actually not much higher than the Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld. However, Myriad Swords had the help of the Dragon God, and the 10,000 flying swords in his hands. One must know that the 10,000 flying swords were the truly powerful treasures. Once the 10,000 swords became one, it could kill immortals and gods alike. Think about it, how could mere immortals resist a treasure that even gods couldn't resist? Because of this, the immortal world and the underworld couldn't stop him even if they joined forces. He relied on the sharpness of the 10,000 flying swords to kill them all. This is also why we call him the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. He stared at the sword on Immortal Crocodile's body, almost glowing green. He swallowed and said, is this sword that powerful? It can even kill gods? Old monster, you aren't lying to me, are you? Let me tell you, if you dare lie to me, I will make sure you die a horrible death. His expression was just short of drooling. Knowing that the myriad swords demon lord was dead, immortal crocodile seemed to have lost his will to live. He couldn't be bothered to explain himself. He just sighed and said, "Little brother, don't drool. Swords are good, but not everyone can control them. The sword that trapped me weighs 108,000 kilograms. With your early stage tribulation cultivation, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to even pick it up, let alone control it. You'd better give up on that idea." 108,000 kilograms? Yu Qianqiu exclaimed in shock. He looked at the sword on immortal crocodile's back in disbelief. Such a heavy sword could be controlled by the myriad swords demon lord like a flying sword? Oh my! To control 10,000 swords at the same time, how strong must one's cultivation be? Damn it! Isn't this bullshit? Who would have nothing better to do and forge such a heavy sword? Yu Qianqiu didn't finish his sentence of letting people see it but not use it. In any case, he was very unhappy. Because even if this treasured sword was given to him, he wouldn't be able to use it in a fight. If he really fought with his opponent, before he could even pull out the sword, his opponent would either run away or kill him. It was too heavy. Little brother, you're thinking the wrong way. No one can refine such a treasure. There is a distant legend about these 10,000 flying swords. Immortal crocodile sighed. Chapter 726. Yu Qianqiu also noticed that immortal Lord Crocodile's emotions were a little off. It seemed that ever since he found out that the myriad swords demon lord was dead, his passionate will to beg for mercy had instantly collapsed. However, it was understandable. Imagine a person trapped at the bottom of this dark lake for more than 100,000 years. If he did not have a reason to live, even if he was an immortal, he would not be able to bear the burden of being trapped here for more than 100,000 years. Presumably, seeking revenge from the myriad swords demon lord was the reason for his persistence in living. Now that he suddenly found out that the myriad swords demon lord was dead, perhaps his only reason for living was suddenly gone. For a moment, he would definitely be disheartened and at a loss. Immortals were humans too. It was just that they were of different levels. If humans did not have emotions and desires, who would want to fight and kill? Oh! What legend? Yu Qianqiu smiled. I'm all ears. Before he finished speaking, immortal Lord Crocodile had already begun to speak slowly. It is said that in the distant past, there was no distinction between the immortal realm, the underworld, and the demon realm. It is said that at the beginning of the world, some of the oldest ancient gods existed in the world. They were the representatives of the first sentience of all living things, and each of them had great magical powers. There were fights between the ancient gods. Once, two ancient gods fought, and one of them suffered a great loss. However, he could not defeat the other. In order to vent his anger, the defeated ancient god released 2 of the 3 souls and 7 spirits in a rage. They transformed into 9 suns, wanting to kill all living things in the world. Imagine that 10 suns appeared in the sky at once. How could the living things in the world survive? Even the sea would dry up. Hou shooting the suns. Yu Qianqiu could not help but exclaim. When someone mentioned the story of 10 suns, he could not help but associate it with Hou. Previously, Nongzhu had mentioned this to him, but it was about cultivation and had nothing to do with the myriad swords demon lord. That's right. It seems that you have heard of this legend. The other ancient deity, Shooting Sun, was called the Great Deity Yi. It was said that he had a bow in his hand called the Supreme Divine Bow. It had boundless power and could split the heavens and earth. The great god Yi was originally a fierce and combative person. When he saw the 10 suns in the sky causing misery and suffering to the living beings, he became kind and wanted to use his own power to completely quell the dispute. Therefore, he shot 9 suns with the Supreme Divine Bow. But this disaster was also caused by him, and he was also the one who ended it. One was positive and one was negative, one was good and one was evil. It was hard to judge. In order to praise his kindness, the later generations named the great god Yi who shot the sun as Ho-Yi, distinguishing him from the previous Yi. From then on, the world was divided into good and evil. This is also why you have heard of Ho-Yi shooting the sun. These 4 words represent justice and kindness. So that's how it is. Why are you talking to me about this? Yu Qianzhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He suddenly realized that this old monster was a bit like a kindergarten teacher, educating him like a child. He said weakly, "What does this legend have to do with the 10,000 flying swords of the Thousand Swords Demon Monarch? You asked me about Ho-Yi shooting the sun, that's why I told you." Then continue what you said earlier. Immortal Crocodile paused and continued, "When the 10 suns appeared, all living things suffered. The once boundless earth became hell on earth. The other ancient gods didn't want to participate in the battle between the two, so they joined forces to create another world, which is now the divine realm. In the end, there were only 2 ancient gods left in the world. In order to make up for the damage he had caused to the human world, the great god Yi finally decided to put an end to this dispute. So he also released 2 of the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, fusing them with the 9, heaven and earth splitting arrows. He pulled the supreme divine bow, and shot 9 arrows in a row. When the 9 arrows were shot, each arrow was earth-shattering, moving mountains and rivers. It is said that these 9 arrows didn't shoot down the sun that was the incarnation of another great god in the sky. Instead, they split the human world into 10 worlds, and each arrow divided a space-time. The 9 arrows sent the 9 suns to 9 different spaces, and the 10 suns couldn't meet each other. From then on, there was only one sun in the sky. Yu Qianzhou's eyes were a little dazed. The 9 arrows divided 10 spacetime, and the world he was in had also heard of the legend of Ho-Yi shooting the sun. This was definitely not a coincidence. Could it be that the space he was in his previous life was also one of the 10 spacetimes divided by Ho-Yi's 9 arrows? Did he just travel from another space to this space? 2 worlds that were going in completely different directions had magically appeared at a point of intersection. They both mentioned the matter of Ho-Yi shooting the sun. What did this mean? He vaguely felt that the legend of Ho-Yi in this world was more reliable. This was because in his previous world, Ho-Yi shooting the sun was just a myth, but in this world, the myth was reality. It wasn't impossible to fly in the sky or burrow into the ground. If the legend of Ho-Yi in this world was true, then comparing the development directions of the 2 worlds, it was very likely that the 10 different spaces had all gone in different directions. And the real turning point was after Ho-Yi shot the sun. It is said that there was a god in the god realm who called the 9 arrows shot by the great god Yi the 9 solitary arrows, meaning that each arrow represented a lonely space. And the myriad swords demon monarch somehow obtained one of the 9 solitary arrows shot by the great god Yi. This 9 solitary arrows can be big or small, and can even split into 10,000 flying swords. After the 10,000 swords become one, they can reassemble into the 9 solitary arrows, which is the great god Yi's heaven and earth splitting arrows. Now you should know the origin of the 10,000 flying swords of the myriad swords demon monarch, right? Now you should know the power of these 10,000 flying swords, right? Heaven and earth splitting arrows. 9 solitary arrows. Yu Qianzhou shook his head, feeling that this matter sounded a little too fantastical. He organized his thoughts and asked, that is to say, there should be 9 solitary arrows, but they exist in different spacetime and spaces. And the one in this space was coincidentally obtained by the myriad swords demon monarch. Is that what you mean? If the legend is completely true, then that should be the case, Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly. TSK. In that case, the flying sword that suppressed you was one of the divine artifact clones. No wonder you couldn't escape. Yu Qianzhou chuckled. Immortal Lord Crocodile smiled bitterly. Little brother, you're wrong. No matter how powerful a divine artifact is, if there's no one to wield it, it won't be able to unleash its power. The reason why this sword can suppress me is not because of its weight, which is nothing to me. It's also not because it's a divine artifact. If there's no one to wield it, it can't unleash any divine power. To put it bluntly, when there's no one to wield it, it's not even as good as a divine artifact refined by the celestial world's artifact refiners. With an artifact spirit integrated into it, it has a tacit understanding with its master and can automatically attack. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It can't be that weak. Then why can't you escape? Immortal Lord Crocodile said helplessly, this is also my bad luck. My 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls happened to be nailed by it. Even so, I still had a way to escape. After all, this sword wasn't enough to kill me. Even if I didn't use my cultivation, I could shake it off with my physical body. But, every 9 solitary arrows was infused with Great God Yi's soul, and this sword has remnants of Great God Yi's soul. Even if it's a remnant soul, it's still Great God Yi's. Too powerful. After nailing my life soul, it directly shocked my 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls to the point that I couldn't move at all. You should be able to understand this, right? When a person loses their 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, they lose the ability to act independently. They are like a walking corpse, unable to control their own bodies. As you can see, I lay here motionless for 100,000 years. I'm really quite unlucky. That's not right. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. Old monster, you must be lying to me. Then what's with those crocodile clones of yours? You can't use your cultivation, but you can still make clones. Who are you lying to? Sigh. You don't know, but I actually don't know what's going on either. Immortal Lord Crocodile said curiously, I don't know the reason either. About every 300 years, Great God Yi's remnant soul suppresses me for a period of time. If not, I wouldn't be able to use my cultivation to communicate with you. But although it's weak, I still maintain the suppression. But it's this little bit of loosening that allows me to use a little of my cultivation. Every 300 years, I can use my natal blood essence to create a small crocodile clone. With a little more time, as long as I have enough crocodiles, they can unite and help me remove this sword. But who knew that I would meet you, and hundreds of my crocodiles died. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It probably had something to do with the East Holy Land that opened once every 300 years. But then he narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, what's with that big crocodile? Why didn't I see it? As he spoke, he looked around at the bottom of the lake. There's no need to look. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. Lying at the bottom of the lake, its 100-meter-long body started to glow with white light. The white light gradually gathered above it. Suddenly, the white light disappeared, and a 20-meter-long crocodile shook its head and tail, moving around fiercely. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and immediately became alert. He said sternly, Old monster, what's the meaning of this? But Immortal Lord Crocodile didn't reply. When Yu Qianqiu was about to attack the crocodile, it immediately turned into a white light and shot back into Immortal Lord Crocodile's body. The cultivation I can use is limited. After creating it, I can't answer you anymore. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. Is this an illusion? But why does it have the ability to attack with a physical body? I'm also of the water race, so I know a little about controlling water. The combination of illusion and water control resulted in the physical attack you saw. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, since you can control water, why don't you use the power of water to remove this sword? Little brother, you really have a lot of questions. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. This is already the limit of my water control. If not, with your cultivation, how could you use 6 spears to repel its attack? If you can't even block the spears you threw, how can you remove this heavy sword? You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.